Welcome to the Select Board meeting for Monday, February 24th. Call to order at 6:34 p.m. First item of business review is meeting minutes from February 20th, 2025.
Motion to approve the minutes from February 20th, 2025 as written.
Second. Any discussion?
None.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I will abstain on that vote, as I was not here. Second item, solicitation permit application for Trinity Solar.
Seems like a pretty regular one with Trinity.
Yep.
I don't have any concerns with it. Make a motion to approve the solicitation permit for Trinity Solar through Benjamin Stone for work in the town of Erving in, there's a time frame on here,
11 months.
remainder of 2025.
Second. Any other discussion?
None.
None. All those in favor?
Aye.
With that, it is 6:35, so I'll call the joint meeting with the Historical Commission to order and to discuss request to establish a museum committee to oversee the Pearl Care Museum. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Brian.
Sorry, get that. You want to come on up? What is best to have them over here, maybe, or do you want it
Probably easier
over here?
if we just fold down the cards for now.
Yeah, we'll just flip down the cards and save you the. Unless you want to assume a different identity tonight.
Not that I haven't before.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Do we know if Sarah's joining us?
Not heard.
Okay.
I don't know.
So technically we don't have a quorum of the Historical Commission.
Seems to be a
Yeah.
Might be related to.
related-
uh,
well, we can still discuss
we
it.
can still discuss it.
We have a quorum, so
We have
can-
a
Right,
quorum,
right.
yeah. So we'll at
Right.
least start discussing it. And
Yeah.
Do you want me to begin?
so, Brian, you summarized kind of where things are at and kind of the projects and how they're diverging a bit. So. We currently have a 8-member? No,
Seven.
seven member, thank you. Historical Commission, and looking at a request to consider moving that to 5
Yes.
and then establishing a Care Museum Committee as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
That's a really short summary, I know.
Yeah. No,
If you-
that's fine. And we currently have 6 members, and it's hard to get that 7th one. So this conversation comes up at the same time that we keep talking about, well, our interests have separated because there's 3 of us that are so interested in the Pearl Care building, and we were when we got on the committee. We didn't realize that they didn't really have responsibility for it in the beginning. But that's where our interests lied in the beginning. And so as we went forth working on the project, we realized how big it was. And as we get more projects coming in with the Historical Commission, it's like, I can't do, I'm volunteering. I'm willing to do some things, but I'm not willing to spend an awful lot of time. So my attention, and I think I can speak for Betty Lou and Kelly too, that we would really like to form another committee and just take care of the Pearl Care building. And at the same time, I think that there are other people interested in helping us. They just, they go, when we ask to have them go on the commission, because, I don't know, they just think it's a larger, I don't know, a larger task or whatever, but I just think that we could get more people to help us if maybe we explained exactly what we were doing, because everybody wants to take care of the history of the town. And it is a huge project, and that's where our focus wants to be. Our hope is that it's unanimous that we separate, but there's a few questions that we have before we can make that decision. And that is, number one, is the select board, are they willing to put it to the town for us to go back to a 5-member committee? And then if we were to separate, what would that look like? What would we have to do in order for the town to take back the Pearl Care building and then establish another committee? What do you need for us to do to make that happen? And if those questions are answered, then I think we can go back to the commission and we can either vote for it or not vote for it. I mean, but we need those answers.
That makes sense. Before we try to at least figure out how we get the answers if we don't have them, other questions from the board on kind of what's in front of us or what's being asked?
Yeah. Not a question as much as a comment, is that, it seems like we're always working hard to get people to volunteer, and especially if it's purely a volunteer thing without a stipend or some type of compensation other than the self-satisfaction of giving back to the community. Maybe to the point they've made is, if they can volunteer to do what they have passion doing, then I'd hate to lose more people because they would say, oh, well, this other side of it that I don't care about is just too much for me, and the net value isn't worth it anymore. I think legally there's a way we can disband a committee and then reform new ones, as long as
You don't even need to disband to address the historical commission piece if you wanted to. It's simply taking a request to the voters to amend the bylaw
Right.
and changing the membership structure. And if the voters say yes, it would be effective immediately. So that's easy. The creation of a new committee would either be the decision of the select board to create something under your purview, or to similarly bring something to town meeting and ask the voters to establish a new committee by bylaw.
The new committee, did you have anything, Scott, before?
No,
Okay.
go ahead.
The new committee, is there statute around that, or would it fit more under our purview to create?
I have not found a specific statute
Okay.
related to this, so I would believe that you would either do it by vote of the select board, or if you wanted something more permanent, a general bylaw.
And then the Pearl Care Museum specifically falling under historical or not? Is that, I didn't really get that out of the memo. Has that ever been said, not historically, has that ever been said formally in any way, like that it is the Historic Commission's to maintain? Or is it more of an informal task assigned along the way
I would
that
have
we
to
know of?
dive deeper into the historical records of how that came to be. The structure has been the town structure, I believe,
For a long
for a
time.
very long time. So I believe the town made that building available for its purpose. You had a historic society, so I believe that much of the collection was something that was gathered and assembled by this nonprofit group that no longer exists.
Right.
And when they decided to disband, they gifted all of the contents to the town. The relationship between the Historic Society and that building via the town, I'm not clear as to if that was a formal arrangement or if that was more passive. My understanding is the Historic Commission was assigned oversight of this. I think there were some members who had some general interest in artifacts and town history. But in the near decade I've been here, the museum's been open twice to the public. And I think that's something that the members are trying to change. And we have some significant challenges in that facility. It's not ADA compliant, and we'd have a lot of work to do to get it there. So it would require sustained effort.
So, I think in summary, a town meeting article to change the count of members in the historical commission is pretty straightforward. Just bring it, change it to 5. If the voters approve, so be it. Effective date then, or end of the fiscal year, whatever makes sense. An oversight committee for the museum, while we could establish it, I think we probably have to find more about the original acceptance and if there's any covenants around that, or whether or not the assignment of the historical commission to kind of oversee or do whatever level of interest of management of that building has been along the way has just been more of, colloquially it sounds appropriate, so go ahead with it, rather than anything formally assigned or required. And then, if there's nothing formally assigned, I think it's more of a conversation and agreement amongst in theory, then historical commission to say, yeah, we're fine with having that not be under our purview, no concerns, kind of more of a discussion with us here and as a group or 3 groups at that point, potentially, or soon to be, to make that decision. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
Is there anything that we missed or anything else that you're looking for information before you'd be ready to kind of take a vote as a historical commission to come forward and say, hey, this is what we would like to do if the board would support it?
I think we're all set.
Yeah, okay. I don't know what's involved in trying to dig up that information, or to whatever extent we can. We may not find anything, and we may decide that lends to just, we have that conversation, make that decision.
I think we can work with the town clerk's office and look through the town reports
Okay.
and see if there was a submission that speaks to when the gift was received.
Okay.
I'm not sure where, maybe in the vault. So I think between Bets and I, we can start searching through the records, see
Okay.
if we can find it.
Yeah, on a side note, we may want to reach out to the Commonwealth Historical Collaborative. They have a whole website. They still have Sid Scott as the co-chair and all of that old context, and it has Sarah's an alternate along with David. So it's a bit outdated.
Say it again.
It's called the Commonwealth Historical Collaborative, and it lists all the different historic commissions and their makeup, and so I was just reading up on they list the Proby Care Museum in there and talk about it.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Okay. Well, then we'll do that, and I think, I guess, does the board have any concerns with moving down this path? Should the historical commission vote to want to do this?
No, not concerns in reducing it to 5 and creation of a new. I do have a concern of filling the void of those that would depart to go into the newly formed museum commission, leaving the historic commission. Even with a 5-member, it would leave it with,
3.
Is it 3 and
Short.
3 roughly?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
So it would
So
be
it-
just barely.
just barely a quorum. Still,
Understood.
right now it's 1 over a quorum. That would be right at quorum.
I did
With 3.
receive a call from one citizen a little over a week ago who expressed interest in learning more about the Historic Commission. I
Okay.
sent some information in the general process for expressing interest in joining.
Okay.
I haven't received a submission yet, but it's possible that there's another citizen who's interested.
Yeah, that would be my only concern. It's not whether or not we do it, but how we get that one back up to more than just the bare minimum of 3 to function as a commission.
I would be interested to hear back from the commission as part of this. Just is it sounds like, that I'm hearing that the scope being so broad and not being maybe as defined and maybe narrow, or at least more well defined on what is and isn't under their purview, may be causing some disinterest. So maybe, if that's accurate, it'd be good to just understand what you're hearing a little better, because maybe it helps how we advertise or put out to the community kind of what does becoming a member look like, and what is that scope more clearly, so that maybe it's not as ambiguous about what you will or won't be kind of looking at, and whether it's a good fit. Because again, right, I mean, volunteers, your scope is this broad. Please take care of it all. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, we get that that's not as appealing, no matter your passion. So
It's that other duties as assigned.
Oh, my goodness.
That
usually comes from a job description with compensation, though. At least. Okay. Well, we'll do that and then get that information over to you, and then look to hear back from the commission.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you all. So, well, I guess we didn't have a quorum anyway, so I was going to say I have to adjourn the joint, but I guess I don't, because we never quite really got there, so thank you. All right, jumping back to the agenda. I believe we cover regular business. I think we did.
Took care of the meeting minutes. And,
Yeah, we took care of that in the permit.
Excellent, thank you. I think you did.
So we'll move to recess until 7 p.m.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We'll see you in 10 minutes. All right, and we are back at 7:03. We'll start the joint meeting with the Finance Committee, Capital Planning Committee, and along the way, potentially the Board of Health, the Board of Library Trustees, the Recreation Commission, Historical Commission, and all in reviewing the FY26 operating budget and capital requests. So, to start us off, we are going with Health and Human Services. Welcome.
Thank you. So for our budget, this past year, we haven't really had too many changes. Everything's kind of had the annual increases as requested. We have found an animal inspector. Kathleen Burrick has been fortunate enough to find us and apply for our animal inspector position that we've been without for 2 years. It's not in your current budget. It looks like we're still working on it, but it's about a $5,000. It should be less than $5,000 request. That'll include all of her annual trainings, administrative work. Some of the work she'll do will be things like maintaining the barn book, which is through the Department of Agriculture. It's a confidential book that maintains a list of all farms, small aviary, chickens, birds, ducks, things like that. Given the recent increases of H5N1, luckily not in this area, but across the country, it's a very crucial role that we'll need and hopefully not have to use in the future, but it's available to us if we need it. So that will be the one increase that I don't think you're currently seeing. The only other increase that I did not put an actual number to because it's still in the early phases, I've been in talks with Chief Holst. It would be, our hope is to have a multi-use vehicle for the animal inspector, animal control officer, health agent. Honestly, if any other department would need it, a reliable vehicle that can take them into areas that may be less than ideal, not paved roads, things like that. Right now, the health agent's using their personal vehicle, which is fine. It's worked this long, but I definitely think going forward, we've had recent issues with animals that needed quarantining, things like that, and looking towards the future, I think it would be smart for us to look at having a vehicle available to them that's properly outfitted for the transport of animals, to travel into areas that are not paved areas, things like that. The only other real changes I made, we had a $10,000 board and secure budget. It's kind of sat there year after year. Given recent legal expenses that we've had due to condemnations, I transferred $4,000 from the board and secure into legal services. That way it's still being covered, but hopefully it's falling into the proper line items and under budget. That's about it. Everything else is kind of been the same. We keep working with, we partner with the CPHS, the Cooperative Public Health Service, for our nursing services. They provide nursing, monthly drop-in services, vaccination clinics, in-home vaccinations. We've been working with the library as well. They've also hosted vaccination clinics. Upcoming, they'll be starting to use some of the opioid settlement funding that we agreed upon towards recovery meetings, recovery support meetings, support for the coach meetings. The Senior and Community Center will be hosting one-on-one peer meetings if needed, things like that. Any questions?
So that was a little overview of 511 and 512, right?
Correct.
511 and 12, correct.
So am I seeing that in 512,
What's up?
the animal inspector wages in there?
No.
It's going to go into 510, which right now reflects a 0. That's a new line that was created once the staff was hired. To tease that out to give it its appropriate accounting.
But there is funding for that in the detail listed in 512?
No, that's what he's saying. We need to make that.
No,
addition.
this happened
But
about
it's
a month
in here
ago.
listed with detail that says it's for that position.
Double check.
If you look in 512, 511, 100 at 2025, 26 initial, and click on it, there's a detail there. for
I
that
may have written
$2,000
into it.
increase.
Yeah, I might have written into the.
It's like 2139. It's for that and for the health agent. A couple things in there. Something may not be calculating right because it doesn't seem to make sense. But
Does look like you were. Does look like it was accounted for though.
I will say when putting comments in, Brian told me to try and leave narrative comments. Unfortunately, after I put them in, I was unable to see them or make adjustments to them.
oh, well,
So-
that's not helpful.
I mean, it's
you for
helpful
that.
initially. I'm able to communicate a message, just not adjust it from that point.
So because Jeff did put that in, I think the solution is to move that amount to 510.
Correct.
So the overall increase isn't necessary. It's already in here. We'll just transfer it to the correct line item.
Perfect.
But something's not working because the values in the detail are exponentially higher than the values showing.
Because and I don't know why it's not exactly showing, but that position, the health agent position, is in 511.
Right.
And that
Okay.
is showing.
But the detail.
Right.
So how is it there? Okay.
That's a mystery for a different day.
I don't like mysteries on different days. That's why we're here today. So, yeah, so I guess I would just say we need to double check in the software that the numbers showing make
Correct.
sense, even if they're in the wrong 500 something. But the 21 something in 512, is that the appropriate, that amount? 2,100 something? That sounds lower than you were saying, so we'll need to validate that.
The amount they were talking about at this point, because we don't have a vehicle, would be the wage that we need, which is a per
Covering
diem,
mileage.
but also mileage reimbursement.
Mileage and gas, yeah.
So that's not reflected in there yet.
Correct.
Okay, so a portion of, but not the full amount, is showing up in 512
So that's the
right now.
hours. That was the specific hours that we budgeted at the rate, which was 21 something.
Okay.
Again, you may find another comment in there that might actually tease out the specific hours that we
I think I
designated
did.
to it.
Okay, but that's the difference. So we're missing probably 2,500, 3,000
Correct.
in that number. They are able to perform the duties without that vehicle that you referenced, though, at this time?
They are. They are not. They are taking the burden on themselves now. The animal inspector, not so much. It would be more for the animal control officer. But they're taking the burden of transporting the animal themselves in their personal vehicle, which I would most likely bet that it's not outfitted to transport an animal.
Can I just, what type of animals are we talking about? And
Anything that needs to be quarantined, anything suspected of rabies. So if there's an animal, a person gets scratched or bitten by an animal, there's not an owner that's able to quarantine the animal themselves. It becomes the town's responsibility to quarantine that animal for up to 14 days. Or as long as necessary to perform testing. Transport of the animal from whatever site they're located at back to whether it's the kennel that the sheriff's department runs.
mainly domestic pets, we're not talking livestock or,
So, I mean, I guess the potentiality is there. Hopefully, if a person has livestock, they have the ability to transport it themselves. I mean, we can't cover all bases, but yes, mostly domestic animals, or would be or a wild animal that is malaise enough to be caught or put down. But either way, you still wouldn't want to transport it in like a fabric vehicle. You'd want to transport it in a proper container with a contained area. Just things like that.
I absolutely understand that. I'm trying to think through the process, and if it were a larger animal beyond, say,
Sure.
a domestic pet or a
Yeah.
raccoon, say, and now I'm thinking, okay, well, if we're taking on that liability, what type of licensure is required to move an animal of that size? And maybe I'm thinking.
No, that's
way
a good
too-
question. Ideally, I mean, an animal like I don't think there's many wild cows or horses in the area. So I think, we'll know the owner, and when we know the owner of the animal, it becomes the owner's responsibility to quarantine that animal. And the town will support that owner in helping them quarantine it. But it does become the owner's responsibility. So it is mostly smaller animals that would come across that we're unable to locate the owner.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, I'm good. Thank
Okay.
you. I yield.
Is, this falls under the role of animal inspector or the ACO?
So it's the animal control officer would hopefully be the one moving the animal, transporting it, or dealing with the animal however it needs to be dealt with. The animal inspector would more be, doing inspections, driving out to the homes to talk with the owners, things like that. So hopefully in that function, it's more of the animal control officer. I had begun speaking with Chief Holst about their vehicle, their older vehicle that they'd already invested money into to upkeep it. And he has an older quote. We'd have to run more numbers that are more accurate and more recent, because anything he had run was older. But that's hopefully a continued conversation.
So, in theory, if this was approved,
Mhm.
what happens when the health agent has the vehicle, but then an ACO needs the vehicle?
That's a great question. That's high variability. If the health agent has an area that are unable to get back, or it's unreasonable for them to get back, then obviously the vehicle's not available. The chance of them both needing the vehicle at the same exact time, I think, is relatively low. Or the health agent's in an area where they could return the vehicle if needed, triage it and see what's more important.
Excuse me, other questions or on that budget?
No.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So action-wise, we just need to update and make sure we have the numbers right, and we'll get them moved around for our next review. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Historical, do you want to wait a little longer, or do you want to go now?
We'd love to go now.
Okay. All right, well, whoever's going to represent and cover the budget, please come up. Yeah, ideally look for one member to come present. Please.
You're going to be going to 670 and 691.
And so for us, that's Pearl Care first and then historical second. Okay? Yeah,
Correct.
691, yeah.
There aren't any significant changes from last year. It took us a couple of years to kind of figure out or to make a plan as to what we were going to do, and we're still in the process of trying to figure out what we're going to do with the building. But there are a lot of updates in plumbing and electricity and a lot of repairs to the building, which Brian actually put a number together, and it's like up $500,000, something like that, which we need to talk to you about at some point. But at this point, we're just trying to be able to get in there to do the work that we need to do to organize and catalog the items that are in there. So the figure that's in there would, cover anything that needs to be done, but I can't specify what that is yet. And then also in cataloging and organizing the materials, we need supplies for that. But then also we need to figure out how we're going to preserve some of the material, especially the older material. And so that's going to take some money as well. But again, I can't put a number on it because I don't know that yet. That's about it.
Who uses that Brian guy for numbers anyway? They're always too big. Questions on the Pearl Care?
Yeah, I
budget?
thought last year when we did budget season that specific to the Pearl Care building, there was a request. It was almost like a capital request for around $10,000. and that we had kicked it back and said this wasn't capital, this is more maintenance, and it should be worked into your budget as a maintenance line item, which, am I not seeing that here?
So there, you've got 5,000 from an operating perspective, 5,000 for electricity, 5,000 for heating oil, 2,000 for building maintenance, 2,000 for the purchase of supplies. And then like we do for other town buildings, we have the annual appropriation for general building maintenance to play backup for unexpected costs.
Okay, so it did not, okay, I was expecting to see a $10,000 maintenance line.
Oh, yeah, no.
Okay.
That's
So
a
how
good
did-
thing, right?
Well,
Yes and no.
maybe not.
We're a little bit behind on this because we had hoped in the summer to be able to finish the asbestos work that needs to be done to allow the heating system to be restarted. We have to remove some wrappings, get those pipes replaced so that the heating system can be turned back on. So though we have not spent the oil, the reason is we need to get that work done first.
Okay.
So that work will be scheduled for the spring. We'll get that work done over the summer. So we will start using those line items this year.
Okay.
So where did the 10 end up folding into if it didn't go into maintenance, the maintenance line?
We didn't increase town buildings, but we just took the same approach. 2,000 went in for building maintenance. You've never had a museum, to remind everybody, you've never had a museum budget until this current year. It's always lived in town buildings. So all of the heating oil in past years, all of the electricity, all of the repairs have always been charged to town buildings. So this was your first year of starting to tease it out. And it was our best estimation with a shuttered museum to assume what we would need for this first year. We tried to go through the records of all of the expenses and try to articulate specific costs, and we weren't able to find everything that we were hoping to find to give a better picture of what we needed. So
Good there.
Mm-hmm.
And the historical commission budget?
I'm not, Sarah, I thought Sarah was going to be here to discuss that. So there isn't an increase in the budget, but I can't talk specifically about what the expenses are there. And I don't have the line item by line item like you have. I don't have that on my paper
you
here.
said the summary.
Yeah.
Yep.
So could you
It was a
tell me
level-
what the
It was a
historical
level
commission
funded
has?
3,000.
Just 3,000, that's it, yeah.
Which is just an expense line, so
Yeah.
nothing significant there broken out. Other questions?
No questions?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Next up is senior services. Paula? Welcome.
Thank you. Look at the camera right in front of you. Jeez.
Every Monday night.
Yeah, but I don't remember. Oh, yeah,
Wait till
okay.
you get back and watch it on YouTube.
I can't
The
wait.
Zoom is impressive.
Ryan, what are the numbers?
I don't think it's 4K HD yet, but
You're
Okay.
going to section 541 of the budget.
thank you. I could be wrong.
If you are, I'll let you know.
Please don't.
Please do.
Oh, goodness.
Okay. All set?
All set.
Ready when you are.
Take it away.
All right. There's not a lot of changes, if anything. It's pretty much where we went a little bit up. We took it out of other accounts. The one thing I am a little concerned about, and I wasn't concerned until today, when I opened up my electric bill, and it was the highest I've ever had it, and it by $1,000. So I took, if you look at electricity, I left it, it was originally 25.5, and I brought it down to 25 with a negative 500. But I mean, I'm just hoping that that doesn't continue with that. And I know we've had some cold spells, and And if anybody comes in the senior center, you know that we're always freezing in here, so we're not like jacking up the temperature. But our bill was $3,400 and some odd dollars this month, which is outrageous.
Ouch.
Okay, that's the highest I've ever had. So that would be my only concern. Other than that, where we went up a little bit is purchase services, and most of that is instructors that we have. We have 9 exercise classes a week. So we went up in that, and plus I wasn't sure at this particular time, we have not, I shouldn't say this, we have not given them a raise in probably 3 or 4 years. So I kind of anticipated that that may happen.
So am I looking in the wrong spot? Because I'm not seeing an increase.
No, I see it's 0 too.
You're
Or
not
a
seeing,
decrease in electricity in the current year.
yeah, for 2024, it was 25.5, and for the, oh, is it, did I go? I thought it went
It's
up.
20, in 23, 20, well, yeah, no, in FY '24 it was, in FY '25 currently it's not. So '26 it's level funded, it looks like.
Yeah.
25.
And again, services, if the vendor raises the rates, then, you know, they have to adjust
Right.
at that point, but,
Right,
you know, we won't know unless that happens.
exactly. It's just that I almost passed out today for that one, but
The electricity,
holy
yeah.
mackerel, you know?
It's been a cold month, but yikes.
Yeah, but still.
Is there any chance, Paula, like the thermostat's not kicking off in the evening or something like it should be?
You know, we had Jamrog here, and that thermostat is my most issue in here. And I said to them, is it going, you know, like, is it temperature-wise going on at night and not coming on? He said, no.
Interesting, okay.
Because I thought that maybe it was set for time, like, and
Yeah.
the times could have been mixed up. But he said that it wasn't, and I had to take the word for it because I don't know any better.
Okay.
Some things I do, but that I don't.
You did have, in comparison to last February, you have a significant increase in your kilowatt hour usage.
Correct.
It's almost
It's a lot
5,000
colder.
kilowatt hours more.
Yeah, it's a lot colder, but it's mini splits too, so it's all electricity without
Right.
solar offset. I mean, it could
Exactly.
go up fast.
And I know
But, you know, like, nothing's really changed. We haven't, you know, like,
Yeah. Well,
turn up the heat and all that. If
are you
anything,
looking
I'm
at that data right now, Brian?
turning
I
it
just,
down.
I just
What's
pulled the
the
Eversource invoice.
temperature reference? Does it'll reference year over year, I think, doesn't it?
I'm not seeing that on this
Okay. I
page.
don't recall where, sometimes they do show
Well, this
kind
is
of
for
year
an
over year, how different it was, but it might not be on there.
Well, like, for example, I keep a record of every single month, what it cost us. So like, for example, in 2024, for January, it was $2,089, and then February was $1,079. This year, for January, it's $2,479, and then February was $3,437, which
Do you have the detail on what your delivery and transmission charges are?
I do.
Because I know that's where,
I don't have it here,
Oh,
but
you're right.
it mostly is that. And I know that they're working on what is the issue there. Because it's happening even at home.
Yeah, that just
It
had
was
a
very
significant jump
substantial,
within the last month.
yes. It's the delivery, is it the delivery that's?
Yep.
Yeah,
delivery and transmission is where,
Yep.
at least in my day gig, we've seen.
but that was my only concern, if they don't fix that. You know?
Yeah, looks like there's also demand charges for
Pardon?
looks like they're assessing demand rate charges.
Well, they're supposed to, because I think everybody's a little irate at this point about that. Do you, I mean, I'm just telling you how it is.
Sure.
It's true.
Questions?
Best way to shoot is straight.
The The one thing that we have is we have had a very big increase in people coming in. So, you know, we're averaging 53 people a day. And we've had 12,898 people that scanned into the building. So that's pretty nice. And of those people, 372 people are constant. So, pretty happy about that.
Is that for how long was that number?
Pardon?
How long was that for
From
the year?
January till January 1 through December 25th.
Got it.
Paula, does the salary line contain any overlap for the new director?
It does not.
Okay,
I don't believe it does, correct, Ryan? It does not.
okay.
I'm glad you said that, because that was one thought that I did have that was not in there.
Okay. Do you have an idea about how much overlap you would prefer to have in a perfect world?
Well, I really think that when all this transpires, we're going to have like, what, a month?
Right, the goal is to have, if we have a successful search, have the candidates start in June and allow a few weeks of overlap, and Paul has already set a retirement date. So that's about 3 weeks in the month of July.
Right.
Okay.
So very little of next year's budget would
Yeah.
have time for it anyway.
Right, and I believe that there's a little bit in there for
There's a little
hours
cushion in
and
there.
so forth that
Okay.
Brian and I have discussed.
Okay.
So I think that should be all right. The only other thing is, and it's not in here, and we did not put in for capital for it, but these floors are increasingly getting worse. And you'll see
We
I've
did.
added on 4 more pieces of tape.
We did.
We did put in for capital.
You did?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right. Any other questions? Anything on that capital
Pretty
request?
straightforward.
I think we've already touched on it before.
And everything that, that's in there, it's usually what I've gone is year to year to year to do comparisons, and I have all that documentation if you ever need it.
Great.
Didn't you also have a request in your narrative for a part-time cook?
You're so good at that. Yes, but let me just tell you, let me tell you about that. I really believe, and Brian and I have discussed it, there is an opportunity, if you get a block grant, that you can use 20% of your block grant towards the cook. And I would definitely consider that. We have been told that we are going to have services here for a long time from LifePath, and it's been since September, and July came around and still nobody, and then in July I got a phone call that said they have no one for us. And how that works is LifePath provides the food, they also provide the making or the warming of the food. And there's no one to do that at this point. So if anything, that is one thing that I said for the future. That would be the only thing in my narrative that I would really want to push, is to have something of that nature. It doesn't have to be 5 days a week, but I think 3 days would be sufficient.
Okay. Is that something you'd want to push for this budget?
I don't have it in here for this budget.
Okay.
And the only reason I didn't is because I thought, I am not sure what the next director wants to do and what direction they want to take it. I just didn't want to put them in a situation where, you know, I'm sure they're going to want to, but there are other avenues. Like I said, the block grant, maybe there's other ways to figure it out.
Okay.
Maybe, you know, LifePath, that didn't cost us anything, so maybe LifePath will be in a better situation at that point, and they might be able to service it by then. I'll see what I can do.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I think we're good.
Okay,
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
thank you so much. I know I only had 10 minutes, so that's good for me.
Did well.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Where did I lose my? So, Board of Library Trustees and Public Library Services is next. Abby, you are representing, I expect? Okay, thank you.
We're all going to go to section 610.
Is it just me, or are they loading pretty fast tonight?
Yeah.
Just as an
Not too bad.
aside, because I feel like we're all clicking on them and I don't hear anybody waiting or.
I've been kicked out 4 times.
I've been kicked out 4 times. Keep getting kicked like crazy.
So it's fast
Okay.
for you.
Yeah,
What is it about?
The head of the table.
Kicked it.
but not the finance committee.
Kicked out as in out of RDP.
Yeah, it brings
Okay.
us back to the,
Okay, thank you.
you've gotten the boot, and
Okay.
we'll try and reload you back in.
Wi-Fi, bad.
Yeah, it's this side of the room.
Excuse the. Oh, maybe it's the Wi-Fi over there. Well, interference or something.
Maybe we'll get her early next week and we'll change
We'll settle
our
I
seating
digress. You can swap with Capital. See how it goes. Okay, back on track.
Is there not a clock app on our phones?
Is there a what?
Not a clock app
Oh,
on
there
our...
should be. I don't know. iPhone or Apple? No, Samsung? I
Yeah.
don't know. I'll put that in the other IT notes over here.
So much for a timer.
There's not a clock function.
We
but
tried a
to the point.
timer.
Right?
We got one somewhere, right?
On
We
our
did
town
get
phones,
one and it was a
flash.
dud.
Apps
Oh,
are
it didn't work?
Impressive.
Oh, okay.
No, it was an
I
absolute
don't remember
dud.
seeing it. That must be why.
Yeah.
Not yours.
Okay.
Town phones.
Town phones, yeah, they. I'll check.
Pull out the
I got it on my
device.
watch.
Dun, dun, dun.
All right, now I'm ready.
Excellent.
And
Take us away.
All right.
Every
Abigail Baines, Library Director, reporting for the Board of Library Trustees and the Erving Public Library. Well, the Erving Public Library is thriving. Hooray! Next month makes the 5th birthday of the new building, and we hope that everyone will join us for a celebration on March 30th to gather and express our gratitude for this amazing community resource.
God, 5 years already.
Hooray to you all for doing
Hard to believe it's been that
Does
long.
not seem possible.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
time flies when you're thriving.
This is true.
We have some wonderful statistics and summaries of our services that'll be available in the annual report. So I'm not going to go into those details, but I really encourage everyone to read it when it comes out. The current public library strategic plan period is from 2021 to 2025. And I just thought I'd mention some of the big picture goals that we're keeping in mind with our budget this year. Maintaining excellent service by having professional and helpful staff, bringing a wide range of programs for all people, maintaining collections, circulating items that satisfy and inspire the community's needs for educational, informational, and recreational materials, building awareness of the library, especially by reaching out to non-library users and underserved populations. And of course, we will continue to maintain, protect, and preserve the library's external and internal facilities that are so beautiful and we are so grateful for. A couple of things to note is that we have a really active play group this year on Monday mornings. Just today only, we had 23 children under the age of 5 and 15 parents from all over the community. We also had a visit from one of the adult day programs with their patrons using all of the services as well. We had a really exciting Bigfoot and UFOs event recently that had so many people coming into the community room that we had to turn them away from standing room only.
Wow.
And we've had a book club that struggled around a little bit, but everyone really wanted it, and then recently it's been starting to do really well. So those are some really nice highlights. We're going to be working on these goals through 2025 as myself and the trustees embark on our next phase of strategic planning. And that'll look like either prolonging this plan a little bit more to finish a few things or coming up with a new strategic plan entirely. The FY26 budget was submitted with a level funding request. However, it is important that we address the shortfall that would be caused by level funding. There are bottom line expenses which increase each year affected by external factors which can't be lowered or avoided. The library budget, if level funded, will have an estimated total shortage of $11,350, which would include the following line items. About $3,500 short in electricity, about $1,300 short for our Ethernet bill, about $1,000 short for our security monitoring, which includes the alarm system that is very important with the type of facility that we run, about $250 short in fire alarm services, which maintain critical services for the building, including testing and having that system available, and then about $5,300 for the collections. The library is required to maintain a certain level of funding for the circulating materials in order to be certified with the state. We've gotten into what that means in the past. I'm happy to answer any questions around that. But without that increase, we risk our patrons not being able to borrow books from other libraries in the area or use their library cards at other Massachusetts libraries. In past years, similar shortages have been accommodated by a combination of grant funding and absorption by the Culture and Recreation Omnibus budget. We have no appropriate grant funding on the horizon and no staff capacity to seek further grant funding for FY '25 or '26. Relying on the omnibus budget is obviously not a sustainable option. So it's our hope that the Select Board and Finance Committee will propose that these lines be funded in full for FY '26, which is about a 4.2% increase on last year's budget.
And that's, excuse me, that's not reflected in the submission. That would be additional to this.
It was
right?
in the comments because we were in.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Okay. I just want to make sure
It's in the comments
the
and the
only thing there
narrative.
is-
It was not reflected in the submission as instructed.
Okay.
I think on the narratives, there's a significant budget impact section where the comments like that were listed.
I just want to make sure we see some changes, but those are all the baked-in adjustments for
Correct.
salary compensation, so.
Yeah, salary was the only adjustment.
Okay.
And there are more details about the certification in the justification area as well, if that's helpful.
Question on the electricity, and I probably come back to this every year, and I'll look half to him, but the solar piece that finally kind of got going, I want to say about a year ago, and we finally started seeing that come back.
Yeah.
That doesn't, because of the way we have to receive funding in, that doesn't directly end up offsetting the electricity cost in terms of your
The
budget,
solar
right?
panel does not offset the entirety of electricity. We
Right.
see a significant effect in the summer. So the electricity bills are lowest in the summer, even though
Right.
we're cooling.
But what you're still seeing in the summer months includes those delivery charges, the ones that we were just talking about with Paula. Even though the solar panels in the summer are largely generating all of the power for the library, we're still getting hundreds of dollars a month in charges just for delivery.
Even if they're not using power?
Interesting, huh?
So,
How can they do that?
well, I don't know if this is true of the library, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if they're generating and that power is going to the grid, they might be giving us credits, but then they're selling it back to us at the rate, which includes the delivery and the transmission charges. So,
Yeah,
And I think some of the
the
net-
same way I feel about it too.
Yeah.
Well,
if
and
it
some of
was
the net
from-
metering is they're trying to move to this, and without looking at it, I don't know if it applies here, but what they're trying to do is when you're generating but making in excess, they're charging you a delivery fee to route that power out and be your battery. And then when you have a credit for that excess that you sold back to them that you paid to deliver to them, when you buy it back, you have to pay to deliver it back to you with your credits, so they're doubling your delivery charge in theory, right? It's transmission twice, effectively, for the excess power and the, maybe, that's one example of some of the net metering challenges, because they still have the transmission lines to be your battery for the different periods of time that they need to upkeep, and so they're trying to offset that.
And I don't think those
That's
were costs
part-
that were anticipated when we were going down this road.
Right.
There's a lot of things about how that offsets that hasn't ever quite gotten where we thought. But I actually meant the incentive payments. Renewable energy incentive payments that we get, which are not the credit, not the offsets on the net metering. The additional smart credit is not directly offsetting this, right?
No.
It goes into the general fund.
Yeah, it goes back to the general fund. There's no way to put them in a revolving fund. There's no way to put them anywhere else. We tried.
Do we have any idea roughly what that is? I'm just curious how much more offset to that budget it really is, because
I
it's
wanted to say it was
It's generating.
$2,000.
a what?
How much?
I thought it was $2,000, but I can double check.
Well, it's not pennies at least. At least you didn't say 200.
No,
Okay. And just close enough. I was just looking to get a sense of
it's not the right report.
how much of that is
It is right.
truly coming back in, even if it's not directly offsetting.
I'll
We've
research
talked about
again,
the
but-
lighting also, which may decrease the cost of electricity if it's controlled differently.
Yeah, we'll
And
get that.
Brian's been working tirelessly to get us a contact to continue that work. So that's all we can do at this point.
I was just gonna ask, how long have we been shifting around in the omnibus budget back to the library? And why hasn't that come to anyone's attention outside of the library? Because this is like the first, I think FinCom is hearing about this tonight, so
I don't
that's rather
know that I can answer
surprising.
the second question. I know that at least last year,
least
the
once.
electricity went over
Yeah.
and the wages went over, and I offered to transfer for the wages from the state aid fund, and Brian said there was money in omnibus so that the transfer wasn't necessary.
Why did wages go over?
When you all amended the wage tables last year,
Yeah.
we had a certain amount of money put aside,
Yeah,
and that covered largely, I think 80–90% of the changes, but there was a portion that wasn't covered. And so what was available was broken up proportionally amongst all the departments that were being adjusted.
okay.
So in many departments, there was not enough to cover all that wage adjustment.
Okay.
The library's budget just was additionally tight with the electricity and the other changes.
Was there a change in status or hours as well? Because I didn't think it was just wages. Or was that a different year?
That was a different year.
Okay.
It's primarily been electricity and wages, and I believe the year before that, there was an overage of electricity as well.
I know utilities has been there a few times.
That would be something in the future for any department. It would be helpful if the FinCom is made aware of that before budget season. Because coming in, and I read your narrative beforehand, and coming in tonight, I don't think we had any idea that there was shifting happening within the omnibus budget, which says the library their budget is not getting funded as it should be.
Right.
So that would be something that would be nice if we knew ahead of time
So
that that was occurring.
to that point, you have no policies in place for how to handle that. And so I would recommend that we establish some type of transfer request process, or if that needs to happen, that there is a interactive process between the select board and the FinCom.
Department to department within an omnibus line?
Because right now you just budget on the bus. It's all
Because technically
all
that
groups.
it's one bucket of money no matter which department it's assigned to.
correct.
That's an internal control beyond that.
That would be establishing an internal control, correct. And I think that's a great solution. It just never has existed before.
And I think having Zobrio and having the visibility is going to help us see that better. Where however it got lost or we didn't communicate it well, it'll be more obvious that we ran something into the negative, and hopefully we'll be able to pick that up quicker and quicker as we develop our skills and reports in this
Agreed. I
to
thought
better
this
inform
report
our
had
budgets.
revenues on it, and it's just aggregated, so I don't have the detail, but I'll find it for you all.
Okay, that's fine.
I will say that Sobrio has, and the recent changes to the accounting system and the changes of accounting codes have made it much easier to manage a departmental budget by far.
I've been surprised and impressed by the adoption, I will say, from all the departments and everything, because these kind of changes are usually not easy and not well received, and many have actually been very excited and happy about it. So, which helps us. I mean, we're probably struggling more because we don't use it as often now as you have, but we're getting there. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Chloe? Okay.
Thank you.
So, but I don't want to lose the fact that there is a request in there to increase the budget. more than is shown. Any questions or concerns specifically? Additional questions?
No.
And so I get that number right, it's 11,300-ish, right?
11,350,
Thank you.
and that takes
You
into
have something?
account. I was just gonna say that takes into account all of the required, like the 20% and everything. The 11. Okay. I thought I read that, but just wanted to make sure.
Thank you, yes.
Yeah, thank you for the narrative. That was really thorough. It was nice.
Okay. And I know there's some potential capital things down the road, but right now there's no capital for you this year specifically, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I'd say the only sort of other thing floating around is the propane.
Yeah, I did see the note about it's every 5 year.
Yes, there's currently a $100 propane line, but we've never had to fill the tank since the building was opened. And it's about at 50% now after running the generator as needed for 5 years. So we've been seeking a delivery from Osterman, which has become a mystery.
Beyond frustrating.
Did it just disappear?
Well, in 5 years they went inactive because we never filled it.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
I need to circle back to that one.
We
But
had to
this is the year.
reestablish an account, and then they got confused about where to deliver it, and so we're following
Everybody
up on
else
it.
got propane, bought the library.
But that'll be, once we know how much that costs, then we can actually plan for it and put it in a revolving account, because a yearly operating expense or something that only comes around every 5 years isn't exactly feasible.
Yeah, okay.
Got it.
But that's all I got for you
I
guys.
think the lighting, which again, hopefully will solve where we are, but if it needs more, that's the one of the capital, maybe,
Yeah,
we just
which-
don't know. And then at some point, addressing the issue with the sewer line, maybe something that comes up. But I know we
And
want to
what
do it
about the
with Care
doors?
Drive. and-
Indoors.
Indoors,
Indoors.
right. Doors is the
You
other.
will receive a comprehensive capital plan for us next year with the upcoming things, but I was instructed to not plan any capital for a building that was only 5 years old. So once it becomes, now that we've reached that 5-year point, we'll build out when we need to replace the doors, when certain other things are going to need to be replaced.
And I think the wastewater, because we'd have to redo when we do Care Drive for the senior housing, and that project that we are hoping to align with then if we can,
Okay.
till then. Depending, we'll see as we get closer. But
I don't know that everyone knows what we're talking about.
That's probably fair.
yeah, so the really brief version I guess I'll give is that there is, it's the main sewer line as it exits the building, under poured pad where all the electrical and generator and utilities are, has a rise in it instead of a downward pitch at one point. It has a hump or it goes up before it goes back down. So it causes various issues with backing up if not enough liquid is run through, kind of once a day to make sure everything moves along. So, and correcting that, there may be a variety of ways we can do it, but it's under a lot of other things and or rerouting, and so it's complex. And because when we potentially put in housing, we will be redoing the sewer main here. Instead of the pump systems we have in these two buildings now, they'll change to feed into that. At that point, we'll be doing a fair amount of infrastructure changes to the main lines out of the two buildings. It may be the right time to incorporate that, whatever kind of solution is best to address that. As long as it doesn't become worse or cause further, maybe less maintainable at low cost issues. So that's the sewer.
In the
Hopefully I captured it.
meantime, yep, in the meantime, the custodial staff have a system to flush additional water down the pipes, which seems to be holding fine for now.
Not ideal, but better than probably the alternative for now.
Yeah.
There are alternatives, and we don't want to discuss them.
Oh, I meant the fix, not that.
To both, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
all good? Good. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
All right, next is Recreation Commission and Parks. Tom, did I see you back there? Excellent.
What's their number?
6:30 and
Thank
6:50.
you.
There you go.
Look at that.
650.
We're starting to get the hang of this. Maybe.
How we doing, everybody?
Welcome. Doing pretty well. How are you?
Good. This is my first time with the camera in front of me, so.
You look great.
I
Thank
heard
you,
it's
appreciate
4K
that.
HD. And you just can't imagine the zoom.
So as this is my first budget, go easy, please. No, we sat down and we looked at budget numbers and looked over the last couple of years, and then we were able to mostly run with a close budget as we had the last couple of years. We did move some things around. There were things that obviously we had to, that got increased. The park maintenance line got increased by the mowing contract had gone up, so we had to move some money from there. But the biggest thing that was our wages probably have increased. Summer parks especially, we were going to adding on an additional counselor. But a lot of that money also is coming off because we've been having the last couple of years, we've had full enrollments. And so all the registration fees cover at least half of, if not more than, the labor, the wages that we're using for that. So salary and wages have gone down. Ordinary expenses have come up a little bit. And, for those things, but, is there any questions for that, anything that you saw that you have questions about?
Just overall on salary and wages, they went down. You're offsetting it with fees.
Yep.
But they went down, even incorporating adjustments to steps and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's all, okay.
Yep.
I just want to be thoughtful about it's more of a decrease than it looks like.
Yeah. It would, with coming back to pre-COVID numbers and registrations, we're able to now anticipate more money coming in from with registration fees. And most of our registration fees come in prior to the end of the fiscal year, because we start opening things up in March. And so most of those numbers come in. So summer parks is one of those weird things where we take in money in the previous fiscal year, but we need to use it in the next fiscal year just because of the way that the fiscal year and summer parks don't line up. Which is kind of goes into some of the other things that are, the capital requests that we have coming forward. I don't know if Brian, we 3 capital requests for this upcoming year, kind of. The first one is the water tower project we're reintroducing. Yeah.
Just one second.
Yeah,
Any
yeah.
questions on the operating
sorry.
budget before? That's okay. I just wanted to make sure I didn't hear any, but before we kind of just transition into.
I don't think so.
None.
Okay, so there's in the park maintenance, is it a 5,000 increase overall
Yeah, that
for the mowing?
for the mowing. Yep.
Okay.
Numbers that they didn't have previously. Now that we know that's a 3-year contract, we can kind of anticipate all of that stuff going
The
forward.
escalators.
The steps increasing. Yep.
Okay. Okay. I'll continue. The
All right.
water tower.
So we have essentially 2.5 capital projects that we're exploring this year. One is the water tower. Recommendation from the rec commission is to remove the water tower at Riverfront Park. We are still waiting on a updated quote from Ty and Bond, but based on the numbers that they gave us and the contingencies that they gave us in the quote from, I believe it was 2021, we have an estimation of $240,000 for the removal of the water tower. If you also want to look back, there's also the proposal from 2021 for the refurbishing of that, which is $560 some odd thousand. So the removal of it seems to be the most fiscal thing, especially considering the issues that we had earlier this year with people getting up on there. It's not fenced in, it's open to the public. Now become a safety and liability problem. So we urge that be funded to take care of that issue. The other thing that we're looking for is Zielinski Park is going to need a new playground. This is different from the other projects that are being completed this year at Zielinski Park. Those were capital requests that were done previously. Currently, the playground structure that is at Zielinski Park will reach the end of its life, I believe, at the end of this year, beginning of next year. So we are looking for the money for fiscal '26 to be able to start the project in spring of '26 to tear down and replace the structure there. We could potentially move it to '27, but we want to get on the schedule. Playground companies, they do most of the work in, earlier times in the summertime. So if we want to get booked onto someone to be able to replace this, we need to get this the ball rolling as soon as we can. We will be working with a project manager like we had with Hammock Park. So there will be some pressure taken off of us in terms of the commission. And yeah, I believe you have the numbers for that in there. I'm not sure, without looking at all my packet, what those numbers are there, but the numbers are based off of a similar play structure that we had put at Hammock Park down on Erving side. And finally, there is a placeholder for fiscal '27 of $1 million. That is for the entire Veterans Park project. The reason why that needs to be in there as a placeholder for the '27 fiscal calendar is that we need to have the town backing us on any parks grant that we need to go in. So just the parks grant starts, again, the parks grant is, the applications are due starting in February, March. So we're already past where we need to be. So if we get the number, the money set aside for fiscal '27 by '27, we have that make sure a fiscal and the yearly dates screw me up here. I'm still wrapping my, it took me how long to figure out the payroll periods? And now we're doing this. So the money comes in for fiscal '27, and that way in early of '28, we can, 27, 28, we can put the application for the parks grant in, which will be up to a 50% return of up to $500,000 back to the town, which is the same project that we they use for the Riverfront Park as well. So that's kind of
I think there's a typo in the request form that says 50,000, not 500. It's 500.
it's 50%,
Just to be
it's
clear.
50%.
Yeah.
It's up
There's
to
just a typo in
50%
there,
of
so-
up to $500,000. So that being said, if the total project comes in under $1 million and we get approved for the 50% return, if it's 900,000, it's 900,000, we get $450,000 back. But if it goes over budget, we only get the $500,000 back of the $1 million.
Questions, comments?
No, go ahead.
I do have a question. Sometime in the past, there have been just sort of generic surveys and meetings of what do you want for our town?
Sure.
And the water tower was a subject of discussion at some of those. And there are some people who couldn't care less, tear the thing down, we don't care. There are other people who couldn't care more. It's an icon.
Yeah.
It should stay. And both sides of the coin. Has there been any discussion or surveys or questions asked about, with dollars attached to it? Like, it's gonna cost us $250,000 to tear it down anyways, if that's what you decide to do. Is it worth it to people that, would they want to put in another $200,000 and keep it and secure it and fence it? I don't know if that question's ever been asked, and again, there'll be some people say, yeah, it's a great use of money, and other people say that's stupid.
Yeah.
But has the question been asked, do you know?
That I don't know. It may have been asked previously. Brian may have an answer that.
I don't know if in a formal sense, I think we have a lot of anecdotal feedback, but the Open Space Committee is meeting right now, and they're actually designing their survey to send out to the residents within the next month. And there was a specific question at their last meeting about including a question about whether or not the tower should be saved. There's a lot of
May put some money
complexities there.
to it, and you give people more of an idea than just an emotional, I like it or
Right.
I don't, possibly.
We meet Thursday, so I can bring that back to the Open Space Committee, and we can ask if they will incorporate that question.
I think that would be fantastic.
Yep.
If I
Absolutely.
remember correctly, and it was before your time, so it was a long time ago. There was a survey that was done about the tower.
Do you remember the result by chance?
Absolutely not.
Just
Would
wanted to
it
tell
be-
us that there was one.
Would
I
it be-
do know that there was one.
Would it be fair to speculate it probably didn't carry $300,000 and $600,000 numbers with it?
It did not.
Okay. And those are not escalated for
Yeah.
today.
Yeah, the other concern is that if, with the tower, is that this number is only gonna go up and get higher every year too. Like, this is not gonna come down, you know.
I'm not advocating for or
Yeah,
against
no, I
at this
understand.
point. I'm just asking a question. If people were asked with any kind of a monetary reference of how much it might cost, you want to do this or that, if you're going to spend 250, 300,000 anyways, do you want to put more in and keep it? I mean, it's kind of an icon. There aren't too many water towers around,
That's true.
so,
Yeah.
okay.
One clarifying question on the tower. It says 240 total and 48 contingency. Is it 288 total?
So the Tie and Bond originally actually put in a 30% contingency in the original quote, so I think that 48 can be pulled out as well.
So the 240 incorporates the
Yeah.
contingency? Okay. Thank you.
It's not costing you to have Ty and Bond update that yet, is it? Because that wasn't actually the request from Capital.
I haven't paid them anything to update
Yeah.
it, but I do think we're at a point where, as we found on other things, the more we ask them to go back and revise numbers and revise
Okay.
proposals, it starts to get to a point where if we're not committing to the project, then we should pay a cost for that work.
Absolutely, and I was surprised.
Yeah.
That's great that Rec wanted to do that. I was just surprised. I wanted to make sure it wasn't a miscommunication because Capital was only asking for
Sure.
updated numbers.
Yeah, and this
if we were moving forward.
And
with
this
it.
was something that we had, we haven't even gotten
No.
the information from Ty and Bond about
Okay.
whether they need to have a quote redone or made, or
Right.
if they can update the current quote that they had from 4 years ago. So we don't have that answer for you right now.
Okay.
For that.
For Zielinski Park and your strategic plan, you actually have that work being done in FY '28. So is there a reason why you're pulling it so far forward? Or not, I guess not too far forward. But
No, I think it's more of the end of the lifespan of the playground, the actual year of.
Okay.
It's just the plastic and metal deteriorates, and that's just kind of based on when it was installed. This is where it is now.
Okay.
I think I'm not sure about the strategic plan where it said fiscal 28, but it might just be a year off from what we thought it was in terms of installation.
Okay.
Do you need the fiscal commitment from the town to apply for the grants to begin with? Or,
For the park grant?
Yeah.
We will, but we won't be applying for the park grant until after the feasibility study is done, which is being started now. That's why this is kind of a placeholder for next year. And we don't need that commitment now, but we will need the commitment in the future.
And the way you did that before was a borrowing authority. And I think you worked with the treasurer at the time. As money was available, you opted to not exercise the borrowing authority and instead move free cash at town meeting to pay that portion. But the borrowing authority was a sufficient commitment to the state to say that the town had supported it.
Yeah, I wasn't here for the Riverfront Park grant, so I'd be new to this as well.
2015.
Yeah. No, I remember that. Yeah, we got a borrowing authorization, so it was borrowing and or any other means, and we did short term through a fiscal year end of some small outlay, and then at the end of the following fiscal year, probably in June special, decided to move free cash to cover rather than take a borrow
Exactly.
because we had it. So that was more of a fiscal decision, financial decision at that point.
good
But we
fiscal
had
decision.
it was for sure. But so you do need the match. You need to have the town authorization on the match
Yep.
on the with the application, basically. Okay.
Yeah.
Can I clarify that?
Oh, yeah, please do.
Sorry, this is Greta. We actually need the town to commit to the full project for the grant application, for the grant funds to be received, because they pay us back.
It's reimbursement.
Right.
So
Okay.
they
It's a reimbursement
require-
grant.
They
Yeah.
require a commitment to the entire expenditure.
Right. Okay.
Mhm.
But I believe we may have, or we could make it contingent upon being granted, so we know we'll get it back, even though we've authorized the full amount. So we know net will be 50% or
Yep.
whatever
Yep.
amount.
And I can pull the language from 2015 to see what you
Yeah.
used before.
Okay. Other questions?
I have a question in regards to the general budget. It's kind of a question. Last year, and we had talked about the Rex revolving account and how that was used, where it was used. And we were supposed to have a discussion with them about how it was used in their budgeting process, and that has never taken place. And so I'm just curious how much is in the revolving account and how Rec intends to use that revolving account.
I don't have that answer for you at this exact time.
Okay. And
But we
that's
can-
fair.
Yeah. But we can definitely have it, get that information
Okay.
to you. I know that,
I'm anticipating that.
I know we have been working our revolving money down, and
Yeah.
because I know that was a problem. I don't know where it stands. I don't know
Yeah.
exactly. So, but information, we can get that information out to you.
Okay.
So,
I think our next budget meeting is on the 10th, is that right? I don't have the calendar in front of me,
I
but,
think you meet the 3rd, the 10th, the 17th.
oh, it's that stage.
Oh, wonderful.
We meet every week until this is done.
So, rather than saying it that way, when do you think you could get us that info, realistically?
As soon as Steph gets it to me. The last I heard it was somewhere around 9.
Okay.
So I'll just check with her to make sure that that's still where it's at now.
So where it is and how you're
With the-
incorporating it can be
Yeah.
maybe mid next week, so we
Yeah.
have it in time for our
Yeah.
10th meeting?
Yep.
Plan for March 10th.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
that's
say
great.
say the 5th.
Okay. Okay.
That'd be great.
Perfect.
Thank you.
I know. That's fine.
Other questions?
Cool.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you all. much.
Appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Appreciate it.
Chiefs, I have a question for you, Wonka and Holst. I have you up first, but we only have you for 20 minutes, and I don't know if that incorporates enough time for the stuff we need to review for you, as well as the EMS review. So I don't know if it makes sense to flip, but I also had you guys up sooner, and I know you're here, so you tell me, and I don't know if you mind if it runs long.
Just do the EMS portion, and so we can get Chief Wolfenbright out of here.
And you don't mind staying and then
No, I'll stay.
continuing after? Okay, let's do that.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. So we'll talk about the Northfield EMS and what that group has been working on and where we're at and how that lends into the budget.
There's a memo from Chief in your packet, along with the new assessment that came out from Northfield EMS. And I think there was a one-page explainer of how they came to those assessments.
Will they get settled, Brian? Is there an easy way to flip between Zobrio and my traditional desktop? Okay.
There's all there is
Yes,
that
there
little
is.
minimize and expander bar at the top. That's it.
No, there's another way, but
I mean, all I do is minimize that and it goes brings it
Okay,
back.
that's good enough. Thank you.
Yeah.
What are you doing, split screens?
No, I just use the minimize and drop it down.
welcome. Thank you. So, Chief Wolfenbright, would you mind introducing yourself? Because not everybody knows you here, I'm sure.
So good evening, everybody. My name is Matt Wolkenbright, Chief of EMS for Northfield EMS, Erving, Gill, Bernston, and beyond. It's a privilege to be here with y'all. It's month 5. Been a busy 5 months, and I never recommend hiring a new chief officer in the beginning of budget season again. Just a thought, but thank you for having me here.
Or at least don't take a job at that time.
Right. Better
You are a
put.
glutton for punishment.
Very much.
So, beside myself, most of the group here, Finance Board, Capital, is not as familiar with what's been going on and where we are, and I know we have the one pager. Do you want to give us like a 5-10 minute just kind of overview from your perspective on
Sure.
you know, or Chief Wonka, as much as you guys want to collaborate on that, I mean, we can also ask questions, but I just give it kind of an opening, kind of where we are and what the future looks like.
Yeah, so I can give you a quick little bit of history and what I've learned over the last 5 months and start the clock, and somebody just wave a hand when I get close to it, please. When I was hired as a sort of byproduct of the work being done through a Collins Group study, which is out of UMass, looking at regionalization of medical services, emergency medical services here in the area. On the shoulders of my predecessors who've been working for many years to build Northfield Ambulance, Northfield EMS, as a collaborative organization, one of the massive tasks that I have been undertaking is looking back at data, at growth, at cost to do business, and really ensure that as we move forward, since I was brought on board to ensure we had reliable and consistent medical services, that the numbers matched, that the model matched, and that it was something that was going to be sustainable for all the communities. That said, a couple of things have come clear. One, Northfield EMS has seen greater than 400% growth in 5 years as far as requests for service, meaning people calling 911 and us having to go out the door. The second thing is, just like everything else, the cost to do business has drastically increased. Two factors that kind of fall into that and why this assessment model and budget number probably opened your eyes quite bright is that as we do more calls or as we get more calls for service, we only get paid in emergency medicine for transports to the hospital. And a byproduct of our culture of needing help, of our healthcare system that is overstressed, overtaxed, is that we get called very frequently for things that don't actually require transport to the hospital. So somewhere around 20 or 22% of our total requests for service across the board, which is in line with national standards, are non-billable calls. The other piece is that while we are running last calendar year about 1,200 requests for service total, we have to staff 24 hours a day. And the staffing model that was built for the 200 and 300 requests for service a year that Northfield EMS did just a few short years ago didn't really account for staffing a paramedic, an EMT, and others in a station 24 hours a day. A lot of the work was done out of the dedication and gratitude and availability of people who lived locally because of time, because of changes in people's lives, and just the amount of training and experience and sort of commitment that goes into providing emergency medicine care. Volunteerism has become a real challenge, and we just don't have the depth of staff to be able to rely 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year on people who are able to respond from home when someone calls 911 in a timely manner, staff an ambulance, respond to the emergency, and then go home. Because we've gone from maybe 1 call a day to now something like 3, 4, 5 calls some days. Oftentimes we're operating 2 or even 3 ambulances simultaneously because, of course, you can't just tell somebody, please hold, we're on the other line, we'll get to you when we can. So there's been an enormous growth that I've seen. And so what I've attempted to develop for the communities is a balanced budget that looks at what it will take to be a employer of choice, hopefully, that we can recruit people. Also to provide incentive for our employees that are here with us to stay on board. I've already gotten the approval from the town of Northfield this fiscal year under our budget to hire 2 additional full-time staff, EMTs, which we did not previously have. So we've grown from 1 to 2 to now 4, plus me, 5 full-time staff members. And then to really look at a sustainable staffing model in this new budget for next fiscal year, we're looking at having 6 full-time providers in rotation, plus our part-time per diem employees staffing, plus myself augmenting them. So the staffing salary line item has gone up, which also includes benefits and other things to go along with it. Final step, if I have 90 seconds left, hopefully, is that Northfield Town and Northfield EMS have relied on as-needed capital purchases for the history of Northfield, have been very successful with some grants to help offset the costs of ambulances, which are approaching $500,000 apiece, of stretchers, of cardiac monitors, of the other equipment, and they've done this on an as-needed basis. Well, in my investigations, and by no fault of anyone really, I find us in a situation where we are sitting at end of life with a significant amount of our equipment, which means that over the next few years we are facing a fairly massive task to start to replace equipment, ambulances, stretchers, monitors, and other things that are all capital purchases. So included within this budget assessment model that I've prepared is a portion that is related to capital, whereby each town over each year, because we're committing to the future of this, not just a one-year commitment, hopefully, that each town would be able to prepare and pay in a portion towards the capital for a 10-year SIP or capital improvement plan that hopefully we can start saving and putting money aside so that we don't have to come to each town each year and ask for hundreds of thousands of dollars separate from our assessment model. So I think those would be the big highlights. I'll start and let you all start to ask your questions, unless you have something, Chief.
You know, you covered that very eloquently.
Facility.
Facility.
That may be just one. Some people may have picked up on it.
I would
But
love a new home for my staff. No, so we were very fortunate at fall town meeting that the town of Northfield did vote by 2/3 majority to appropriate $2.1 million for the purchase of building in Bernardston, the Valley Concrete Building. The sale is still going through. There's some legislative stuff that's pending to be able to deal with one town purchasing in another. But the town of Northfield is utilizing and has approved utilizing their funds with no assessment to the other communities to purchase this building as a town asset to be able to house the EMS agency. The purchase would make it a town of Northfield property, so it would become a town asset. The upkeep, maintenance, and operating costs of the building would be shared across the 4 towns that participate in the service. Interestingly, because of the photovoltaics, and I heard a little bit earlier about some of the challenges, we're well versed in that, and the other energy efficiencies within the building. It's a very well-built concrete building, very well insulated, has all LED lighting in it, heat pumps, things, so on. We're estimating our operating cost to operate the building to actually be almost the same. And what we're paying now for rent on a triple net lease to Sandry for the current garage facility that we're in actually works out based on annual taxes to pay a payment in lieu of taxes or pilot to the town of Bernardston. So we're not increasing the expense, but we're increasing the space and the sort of usability of that space. So very generous again from the town of Northfield. I thank those residents for appropriating this funding for us. And then just look to the 4 towns to distribute the cost for us to be able to be in that building and keep it up.
thank you. I mean, 12 minutes with the addition of the new facility. Not bad.
That's
at all.
it?
Or
My
less.
watch
Or
is
less.
slow.
You got your clock down. Questions, comments about what he just shared, or just overall the documents and then some of the financials that were provided?
Can I just ask a question about there's a table and,
The one pager.
yep, and how come if Erving's estimated assessment is smaller, their cost per person is higher?
So, that's a wonderful question. It has an answer. The answer is that the assessment model is built on a factor of population and on utilization, meaning the number of times we go to a community and the total population. Because Erving is split for medical services between its Orange agreement and its Northfield EMS agreement, the population distribution isn't done geographically, so we are just taking half of the population of Erving to be able to do this, because census data is kind of what it is. And so even though the total population of the town should push it in a different way, we're getting a smaller portion of it. And we do more calls on the west side of Erving than are done on the right side statistically. So it actually throws the N off just a little bit, and that's why you see that higher cost per person, because you have a lower number with more calls.
Basically, it's the call to population ratio for us
Okay.
is
'Cause it's-
unfavorable.
there's a
We have more
larger
calls
population on-
with less people as compared to the other towns. Right? Is that
Yes,
summarize
that would have
that
been
pretty
a
well?
much better way to say it.
Yeah,
than
I mean, you know,
than
if we
talking
get-
for a
Might have
couple
understood
hours.
If we get 100 calls per
apologize.
1,000 people,
Okay.
the other towns are getting 80 calls per 1,000 people.
Wow.
So we're paying a higher rate per call because of the model. And it's 50% population-based and 50%
Yeah.
call-based.
And I can
Can you
as
tell I was
a-
part of the assessment team?
I had a lot of help with it and a lot of asking that very question over and over and over again.
And I was just going to say, I think, you know, using the 50%, like you said, the maps are one thing. It is just the population. The census is what it is. If you were to look at the actual population that is served by Northfield, it's higher than the 833. But in order, you know, without going through and
Yeah.
doing actual calculations of each street that they service and how many residents live on those, and, you know, trying to keep that fluid number becoming a static number so you can use it in a table, you just take the 50%. I mean, it might be 1,100, you know, on that side, and therefore your call volume is more appropriate to the ratio of the residents on that side, and it balances out. But
Chief Wonka, do you know roughly how many calls we get on the other side?
It was about half.
It is about 50-50? Okay.
Wow.
But
It was
with a
considerably
lower,
lower from the other side.
yeah.
So the assessment, I mean, each assessment's based off a 5-year rolling average, correct? And obviously.
The orange one is, ours is on 2 because we didn't have enough data to go back with all of the towns, because this is a relatively new collaboration between all the communities.
Yes,
So the
two-
orange assessment's based off a 5-year rolling average. We are coming off of our 5-year average from joining forces with Northfield in the EMS section. So we're losing a lot of, Orange is dropping off a lot of calls that they were covering from AMR on this side of town.
So their average would have been higher since they covered the whole
Yeah,
town
they
for those
covered
3 years?
There was a lot of calls that the last ambulance company we used did not cover. They just weren't available for coverage.
So their numbers are basically
Yeah, their numbers
off.
dropped down
Yeah.
considerably.
And the Northfield EMS model is 2 years, it'll go to 3,
Right.
and then it'll be 3 rolling after, right? We did do 3,
That is
right?
our plan,
Okay.
yes.
Other questions?
the only question, and it might be in one of these forms, and I apologize if I missed it. You talked about the facility and the upcoming cost. Are those part of this current assessment, or are you waiting for that to be finalized and purchased before those assessments get rolled in?
So they are in.
Okay.
They are my best guess
Okay.
at what we can do based on what we're paying right now and
Yeah.
what our expected costs are at this facility that we're moving towards. Anything's possible in this
Yeah.
world. So I've tried to do my best to estimate. I don't have a ton of data yet, obviously, on it, but the operating costs. And so in our budget worksheet, I did actually increase some of the line items for, you know, it's a larger building, so it's going to take longer to clean. There are actually showers and bathrooms and things that we'll have to stock. So some of our building upkeep is going to go up a little bit, and
Okay.
I did try to account for that as conservatively but appropriately as I could in this.
Thank you, Chief.
And I think overall, like, there's a lot of new happening right now. Staffing to be more appropriate to the volume, equipment, life cycles that are trying to be incorporated in a different way, more sustainably for the number of rigs rolling and needing to be certified. New facility you lived in yet. So every year as we're working on the IMA right now, and that language, the advisory committee will be working with the chief and, whoever we've assigned as representatives in that advisory committee to look at how are the real costs happening and how are we adjusting that kind of rolling forward. So you might see some volatility in the totals that are being assessed. Shouldn't see much volatility and hopefully in the way the assessments are calculated to distribute that.
So I think there's a significant, noticeable increase in the salary and benefits, obviously, because we need more people to be able to maintain the operation and the consistency of it. But the other thing that we were able to do this year is we were able to look at, there was a little bit of money left from the implementation grant that had been received to put this whole project together. So we're applying that towards this next budget year to help offset the increase that each town is seeing. And we're also taking a conservative portion of retained certified earnings to apply towards it. And that number that we're able to use from our retained earnings will have to be established year over year by the advisory board and looking at what's fiscally responsible to help try and keep this. But for this year, because we know it's new and it is a big change, we're trying to find every way that we can, help offset the impact to the taxpayers.
I'd like to say, from a financial point of view, it appears to me that through this collaborative effort with other towns, the Erving taxpayers are getting good value for their money, which is an important thing. There's another side of the coin too. Like, thank you for that, for the financial management. Now, the other side is more of an emotional and a physical thing. Thank you for doing what you do, and the others who do what they, with you. Years ago, Julia or Gavin fall out of a tree, they'd load them in the car and get them to the hospital. They'd be disabled for life or dead. And in today's world, you expect to dial 911 and somebody's going to show up and knows what they're doing. And spending money on that, to me, is money well spent. We can decide, do we buy Julia and Gavin a swing set for the park? That's one thing, but you need to have these services available so somebody answers the phone when you call, when you need them. So thanks for doing that.
Thank you for that recognition.
Good. Okay. Well, and this is capital and operating and hopefully sustainable. So I think we're excited. I mean, we've been spending a lot of time, Chief Wonka, more than I by far, with this task force and this group doing this and trying to build this out before and since you've joined Chief Wolkerbright. So thank you.
Thank you all for all you do as well. Appreciate your time. And if other questions come up, please feel free to reach out and happy to come back and answer them again.
We'll keep you in the hot seat for a while.
Fair enough.
Thank you, gentlemen. All right, Chief Wonka, we will come back to the numbers here after Chief Holst, if you don't mind. Thank you. And that number is lower than our budget. I'll just throw that out there before he leaves. So the assessment in our budget that we had placeholdered is higher. How do you follow that?
I said I have to follow that.
No setup. No setup.
Should have gone first.
So thank you for
Welcome.
having me back. I know I already presented, so I thank you for making the time. Two things that I would like to bring up. An adjustment on my original budget that I had presented was the animal control officer. I know that we had talked about this the past couple years, and we did not do anything with it last year, and the budget that I had presented this year was also going to be a level fund because we weren't going to do anything with it. After I submitted that budget, we did have what looked like a very good application come in. We've put that on the back burner because even if we wanted to hire the person, we don't have the equipment that would be needed to, so the person would be able to get to and from calls and be effective. So I would like to bring it back to your guys' attention, and I would like to move forward with filling that position. And in doing so is going to require us to look at and consider an ACO vehicle. Whether we try to repurpose a vehicle that we already have in town, or we look at to purchasing something that's new. I'm open to both. Currently, we're using Athol's ACO. I don't believe that we're using the ACO to the fullest capacity. I think we sometimes take it on ourselves to say, well, they're coming out of Athol. It's just quicker, easier for us to go and try to handle this. So I also think that Athol, when we originally decided to go with Athol, it wasn't a permanent fix. It was Athol was willing to help us out in the meantime, but would be willing to consider a long-term solution if we needed it. They've been gracious. They haven't really charged us anything. I think they've maybe charged us $100 at most. But I do know that they have asked us for a commitment, a more formal commitment, and I believe the last numbers I had was somewhere around $12,000. I could be wrong, but I want to say it was something like $12,000. That their ACO is an Athol ACO shared with Orange, Royalston, and then they would be looking to add Erving on. Those are old numbers. I don't know what they are currently, and I haven't had any conversation with the chief or their town administrator to see where we stand. So, I mean, I'm more than happy to talk about the pros and cons of having our own versus outsourcing it. My request is to have our own and to move back in that direction. I think having our own, we have had communities around us that have shared somewhat of an interest in joining us. I don't want to say what those communities are because I don't know if they still are, because we've been trying to fill this position for a couple of years now. But that would be an option that we would be able to do is to reach back out to those communities and see if they're willing to, to partner with us.
So I wasn't at the meeting, but my fellow board members reviewed this with Chief last week, and kind of the overall question of is a ACO as a service with an in-house versus outsourced, something that is important and or makes sense, is the right value, even if it costs a little bit more because of equipment and other things. It may not in the overall number. I'll use 12,000, whatever, that's roughly our budget right now, things like that. But what I recall from the minutes was that you both felt that it made sense to have our own resource if possible versus outsourcing it. So that lends to, if we are, then we can't hire an employee to do the work without the equipment. It ties in a little bit to what Jeff was talking about earlier about if it's a shared vehicle or not and how that might work needs to get fleshed out, but it's not on the capital request. So that's item one that Chief's kind of bringing back to here to talk through and like where do we go from here and how do we scope that out to put a number to it that's realistic if we're going to consider this.
Correct.
Chief, how many calls a year do we get?
So I ran those numbers for the last select board meeting, and they were somewhere between 60 and 70. I want to say it was like 67. It wasn't quite 70 is what we had for 2024. And like I had explained to them the other night, Thursday night, is that I didn't dig through those 67 calls and look at each call and see, it could have been a barking dog, it could have been a loose dog, it could have been a deer hit by a vehicle. I don't necessarily know what each call entailed, but we were around just shy of 70.
And what else does an ACO do? Because and my next question will be for you, gentlemen. How are we justifying this expense for 70 calls a year? So what else am I missing? What else does the ACO role encompass?
Training. They have training, and then they have the animal control. They deal with domestic animals. I know that the former ACO dealt a lot with bats, raccoons, calls like that. But it's all animal related. They're not responsible for anything else as far as law enforcement goes. They can present at select board meetings, and in the event that you guys needed to do a dangerous dog hearing or something like that, they would present at those. They would be our liaison for the animal shelter. I do know that our former ACO had a great working relationship with the shelter, and we don't have those connections anymore. Not that we can't have them. I don't have the capacity to go over there and see what they need. They recently raised our rates on us, and we had no ideas. I think that there's some discussion about that now currently going on with the Mass Chiefs and town administrators. But I think we do lose that piece of that connection where we don't have the connections. Our former ACO also did the animal inspections. I know that the town has moved in the direction of hiring, which I believe that the two parts should be pieced out. So I'm in favor of that. But outside of that, Deb, that's really all they do.
Okay.
Can I just add?
Go ahead. You first.
All the work with the town clerk's office for the licensing.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
and
I
the
don't know this
enforcement,
stuff. Yeah.
all of that happens through a process between the town clerk's office and the ACO office under the chief. And that has not been happening for almost 3 years now.
Can you
Forgive me, because I've never really worked
Yeah.
with an ACO
There's-
either.
You have
Sure.
over 250 licensed dogs in the town.
Yeah.
I don't know what our current numbers are right now, but once we get to a certain threshold in the renewal process, if somebody has not renewed, the ACO is supposed to go door to door to the homes to find out why the dogs haven't been re-registered, or if the issue is new dogs have come into the town and the bylaw is not being enforced. So they're an enforcement, it's a civilian position, but it's an enforcement arm that works with the town clerk's office to enforce the bylaw. And like I said, that has not been happening since we have not
Yeah.
had the service.
And animal inspections, so I understand like farm, that side of it. Kennel licenses, is that ACO or is that animal
ACO.
inspector? That's ACO.
ACO.
So it's an inspection, but it isn't an animal inspector area, it's an ACO
We're
area.
behind on licensing 2 of our longstanding kennels because we're trying to arrange for the inspection
Through
of-
Athol.
of the kennels. And that just needs to happen. So there's no issue with the kennels. We just haven't been able to complete the process because of the current relationship.
And to that point, I mean, maybe it was an oversight on my side, but I didn't even know the law was changed. There was a recent change to the law, and it was like, oh yeah, the law changed, but it was well past that the law had changed.
Found out the day before it was going into effect. So
Do you have something before?
I did, and I was going to try to answer Deb's question is, where I justify it in my mind and where I'm leaning towards, there's a number of things, but in terms of call volume, can the police department fit in an extra 1.25? If it's 70 calls a year, 1.25 additional calls for service a year, perhaps. But I'm thinking about the timing and if that's conflicting with another call that could be life and death. Beyond that, I'm thinking of if we're going to put that responsibility to continue on the police to respond to it in lieu of Athol or something else, what type of additional training should we be providing for them? Because I think of the scenarios where, as much as it got great press and it was cute, rescuing a baby cub off of Route 2 without appropriate training could create a huge liability for the town in a number of ways, especially if Mama Bear comes over the guardrail. And so I'm thinking in terms of we could have somebody who is specialized, who has that training, who is close by, who is responsive to that, dedicated to that, and can handle that appropriately and professionally. It's a bad analogy. I was trying to think of something better, but the same thing, if you'll excuse it, is cops responding for years to the French King Bridge, as opposed to now having a CSO, somebody who has far greater training, experience, and responsibility to handle those things of that nature. And in thinking of supporting it with equipment, most of that would be a one-time expense. And if it was a shared use vehicle that a number of departments could benefit from, I would see where the cost, it's the same cost, but if it's spread out, it makes the argument a little easier for me.
And I agree, and I just want to, I am not in any way implying that the police department should function as ACOs.
Right.
I am questioning if we have an MOU with Athol, why they're not being utilized more, and why we wouldn't utilize them for this service instead of trying to run it in-house, our own, and take on all of that additional expense.
And that would be because we don't have an MOU.
We
with
don't
Athol.
have an official
We have a
one.
handshake deal that says they'll cover our calls if we call them.
Right.
We've never signed any agreement with
It was
them.
meant to be temporary.
But it sounds like we could have one.
Right.
Maybe, but the negotiation hasn't happened yet. And then, until recently, the directive I've been given is we are searching for the replacement, and we've been searching for 2 years. So we now have a candidate. So if we're going to move in a different direction, that's a decision that you all can inform on, but we need direction.
Right.
And thinking of our last ACO, so that person took their vehicle home with them. So how do we have a shared vehicle, or is the ACO no longer taking a vehicle home?
Not going to take it home.
So
It will be housed at the PD, or I say the PD because that's probably where it will be housed, but it will be respond to the PD, grab it, handle your ACO vehicle, or if the animal inspector needed it, respond to the PD, grab it, do whatever you need to do, and bring it back.
Can I ask one question? You alluded to that somebody close by could be, if we hired them, would be able to respond quickly. Is this person that you're thinking of close by, or?
Yes. Well, I mean, I don't want to say, I mean, we may interview the person and not. So I just want to be careful, but the application, it lives in a neighboring town.
Could I ask, why would the ACO not take the vehicle back with them? I have some experiences with both. The animal inspector, to my knowledge, is the emergency need is practically non-existent. You go around and make sure that, things are, the animals are healthy and not being mistreated, and the barn inspections and that kind of stuff. I deal with calls from people who say, I think they're abusing their animal. Well, the animal has shelter it can go to, but it chooses not to. It's okay, kind of stuff. As the ACO, there was a guy who was bitten by a stray cat on his porch. He reached out to pet it and it bit him. So do I have rabies? Do I not have rabies? Or in the case of a dog bite, is the dog licensed or not? If it's licensed, it's supposed to have the rabies tag to get licensed, but if it's not licensed, you don't know, and it becomes real personal real quick. If you wonder if this dog, why did the town not insist that it be licensed as it should? I'm going through this stuff to find out if I have rabies. Emotional and physical is difficult. But, and when you have a skunk that gets into a tussle with somebody's cat or dog, and you have to deal with it, I can speak from experience. You don't want to have it in your car. You don't want to have it in the cruiser as you're taking it off to dispose of whatever you need to do. There are some people who will say, well, if you're going to get rid of this vehicle anyways because it's not good for police work, how is it okay now? Well, there's a big difference between 50, 60 calls a year, maybe, and every day, all day, up and down the road. So it may be suitable for what you need. Whether you can get an understanding with another town is a whole different issue. That's a different issue. But if we don't do that, we need an animal control capability. You just do.
So to answer, I think your original question is why would it not be taken home by the ACO? Because I'm looking at it as being a shared vehicle for the animal inspector and the ACO. And if the ACO has the vehicle at their house, now the animal inspector would now be responding to somebody's house, wherever that may be. to get the vehicle, whereas if it's at the PD, it's at a stored location, it's under, I want to be careful because I have a lot of respect for the old ACO, but there's times when the vehicle probably should have been.
It's just better policy and protocol and.
Right.
And just looking at how we manage our fleet. Keep
Correct.
them up, maintain them,
Correct.
have them available.
Correct.
Flexibility.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I'm not trying to micromanage
No,
how you,
right.
how you do your station,
Right.
just from my experience, my opinion.
Yeah.
The ACO gets a call, and there's something going on right now. I mean, this raccoon's chewing up my kid, or whatever it is. So you gotta go from wherever they are, the police station, get the vehicle, or maybe.
Yeah,
But
there's
the-
pros and cons, I guess,
Yeah,
to
there
both of
is,
them, but you're right.
Yeah, and the barn inspections are, is just sort of formality you go through for the most part. People have animals, and it's seldom that they abuse their animals. So, but it's your choice.
I will say, just on a side note, I think, Deb, you had asked a question, or Jim, you had asked a question about barn animals. We did actually have to transport like 30 turkeys. So,
And they weren't wild? They were domestic?
Domestic.
so
That is true.
that's what I was talking with Jeff on the way out. I was like, don't forget, he's like, I didn't even think of that. So
That's true.
there was a time in a house that the Board of Health was involved in, regardless, well, that.
Yep.
So anyway,
So-
so that's,
So, full
All
circle.
the questions that are, my
Did-
mind.
Okay, not that question.
Save them for another time.
Did the questions get answered about kind of the drivers and things about this to the extent, or is there further that we can come back with?
I guess I'd like to see what the numbers are.
Numbers
If there is
for
a
the
possibility.
capital cost?
Yeah, if there is a possibility of something with Athol, what would that number be? If it looks like we're hiring somebody and we would need a vehicle, what would that number be? Or if we're just taking an older vehicle that we're gonna have to replace in a year or two, what would we think about that going forward? To look at the whole process before we make a decision without any numbers.
What specific vehicle are we talking about repurposing?
One idea.
our oldest is car 4.
Right. Well, we had talked about that on last Thursday when we met, and that one is problematic. And it goes back to the same thing. If we're putting in that much work into it, and you can't even drive it at some points, and you have to have it towed to have it worked on, is it reliable enough to do that? The other alternative was looking at the current building maintenance vehicle, the transit van. That one's about 6 years old, has not had, other than one repair that just recently had to be done. It's in fairly decent, but it is getting up there with, miles and usage and, 6 years. Maybe this is this year, next year, I'm not sure. But repurposing something like that, it's easily outfittable with a cage. So to have the transport capabilities, they're very reliable. It doesn't get to what I had never heard Chairman McAndrews talk about being able to go off-road and into some remote places. So I wasn't sure about that. In my mind, I'm thinking transit van's not going to be your solution, but for your normal everyday use, especially if you're going to be decreasing the amount of time you're using it and the amount of hours it's on the road every day, that might be a good vehicle to replace. And they're a lot less expensive than replacing it with a cruiser. They're like, I think we paid 30 or 35 for that one.
35, the last one we purchased.
As opposed to, to outfit a cruiser, it could be 50 plus, so.
Yeah, but you would still have the accrued cost of a vehicle that could have been used for something else, used for this, so you would have to buy a new vehicle for the original purpose.
Right, which is probably now upwards of 40 or 50.
Yes.
So
I can get you numbers and all that.
So-
like,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think I have a lot more questions than I'm with Ben. I think there needs to be a conversation about what Athol would cost us. Are there any other communities that we could work out an MOU with? I believe Northfield might have an ACO. Does Greenfield have, is there anyone else that we could do this with? What are all these costs if it is going to be Cruiser 4? What are the costs there? I know there's been a ton of maintenance on that and it's up for replacement. If now we might be buying a new van and there's just all these scenarios that I feel like we really need all the numbers and information for, and
So, just to respond to that, so if you're looking for like what the MOU costs are, and those are not capital requests. If you're using, so if you're balancing, do you want to buy a new vehicle? Are you giving your recommendation to buy one or not buy one? Sure, but that's a lot of legwork to ask the chief to go through and start looking at reworking the communication about MOUs. That if the board is saying that, and I'm not speaking for you because you weren't here, but Jim and I at last meeting said, yes, there's an added expense, and yes, we understand that, and we are proposing that we go back to what was originally proposed, which is we will reach out to Athol temporarily to have a temporary Band-Aid until we hire somebody. Nobody assumed it was going to take 2 years to find somebody. And we've sort of, in that interim, said, why do we even need to hire one? And what I'm saying is because that's what we said we were going to do a couple years ago, and anytime we can keep services in-house, readily available, that we have a little more autonomous control over, I would prefer to do that. And it's a lot more than just the 60 or 70 calls, as we already highlighted with the, collaboration with the animal inspector, with the licensing, with the various other pieces that go on with that. I would rather have somebody that we have in-house that's under our purview and not just an MOU.
okay, I guess I misunderstood. I thought we were talking about this both as a budget piece and a capital piece. So that's where maybe it's getting a little too confused, but I thought we were discussing both aspects of that, not just the
ACO's
capital.
already budgeted.
The ACO budget is in there.
Right, but you're missing the big picture, I think, which is there's a total cost here to have an ACO. Or a fixed cost to hire a service. In theory, if it's a fixed cost to MOU. If we want to have one, there's a capital investment, ongoing maintenance, all of the pieces that come with that. That comparison needs to include the cost to have an employee against the cost of an outside service and what that value is. I don't think you can't segregate those because you don't have a capital request if we don't have an inside resource. So I think you have to look at the whole thing. We're talking about a program that we don't have today, that we had a budget for, but that budget has been redirected to pay an MOU that hasn't existed or whatever, hasn't been billed, but that's the big picture. That's what I brought to Chief to bring this topic back, now that there was some potential interested candidate, is, well, now we don't have equipment to actually do this job. So I think we have to look at the totality from a financial perspective at the very least. It doesn't matter whether it's an operating cost, ongoing cost, or capital investment. All of that goes into the numbers to be able to make a decision here on where's the value and is it worth the investment? And do we have the money to do it? So I think that's why all of it matters. It doesn't matter as much whether it's budgeted or whatever. It's just how much are those different programs going to cost us and what makes sense.
And that's fair, Chairman Smith. So I guess I can work on trying to get what Athol would charge us.
Yeah.
The piece that is difficult for me to move forward with is are we going to look into a brand new vehicle? Are we going to look into repurposing that vehicle? I mean, to Scott's point, I mean, if we start, I mean,
so not to cut you off, but I agree, and so I think that's what I was trying to scale back to is high level. We don't have, if we're thinking about this annual budget cycle, we don't have the luxury of a lot of time, right. And there's a lot of detail that can go into it. But am I fair to say to capital, specifically about the vehicle investment, it's more about what is a rough number for a vehicle, new and outfitted, roughly. Okay. We don't need every single detailed line item, right? I mean, is that fair to say? We're trying to get, is it 40 or is it 80?
Okay. And I just want to make sure there was some hiccups last year when a vehicle was submitted.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure it's submitted appropriately.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And then what is a retrofit of an existing cruiser under the assumption that gets replaced because it can't be taken out of service? And some opinion of what is that life, because we know it has had various issues, and what's the reliability, and so what are we investing to put it there that will someday need to get replaced? Whether hypothetically we went new and decided let's make new the already in use vehicle replacement and take that one because it'll be less use and utilize it here and do some kind of double switch, National League baseball thing here. We we can figure that out down the road, but directionally, is it $20,000, $80,000, $3,000 more in the operating budget to outsource? Those are kind of, I think, the buckets. Is that a fair for everyone to give a financial analysis of it?
Yeah, just rough.
Yeah, kind of back of the napkin, close, relatively.
Okay. And when would you guys like that?
Yesterday.
When's realistic? Yes.
Not at 6 a.m. in the morning.
We're not going to talk about it tonight.
Nobody responds at 6 o'clock. That's what I'm on.
Can we target this for March 10th when we bring back the other?
Yeah, so I think,
Sure.
it,
Does
by
that
the
give Chief
5th,
enough time?
Does that work?
I'll work on it.
So,
Yeah,
so
March 10th.
March 5th would be the deadline for the data, and so if
So
you,
that's March what?
5th,
5th.
to be in time for that meeting, so if you need longer, reach out and let us know
Do the
before
best
that.
I can.
And then, is that good enough to get us moving forward and
Yeah.
kind of towards a decision? And then you have one more,
Yeah,
right?
one more.
With operating budget?
Yep, so,
Hold on, what?
You have two more. You had Capital sent a list of questions about the vehicle, and that's
Okay.
answered in here. Your response
Got it.
to the cruiser questions?
Yep.
You sent them in the
He did.
packet.
Yes, yes. Two more things. We'll talk about the cruiser. So I had submitted the town had issued a policy on the replacement. We were working on trying to come up with a scale to gauge if a vehicle needed to be replaced. And so I did submit to the chairman, not to put you on the spot, Ben, but I talking with other employees, they suggested that I had submitted it. And so if you guys do look, Car 4 does meet the factor for immediate consideration based on the age, mileage, reliability, the maintenance costs, and the condition of the vehicle. And so I just wanted to get that before you guys, so you had that. If you have questions about it, I'm more than happy. We are still currently having problems with that, and so what I need to, I guess, I know you can't tell me tonight, but are we going to continue to put money into this? Are we going to replace the seat that Deb, you wanted the cost for? Are we going to look into the starting issue on that car?
The last time we spoke about a replacement policy, we didn't come up with a concrete
I was just going to say,
replacement policy, did we?
No, I appreciate you walking through and doing it, but the policy is still very much in a draft form.
Yep. And I think I did put that in my email that I didn't know if it was something
Yep.
that had been adopted or if it was still
Yep.
being looked at. But I know that other towns, the other departments had submitted it when they requested a vehicle, and they suggested I just go through the
I
exercise.
think one of the reasons we were asking to get all the information is to be able to look at it and see if we can find out where the holes were. I mean, we look at one vehicle like this, but it doesn't take into account it's used for this purpose, and it doesn't take into account because it's only used for 5,000 miles a year, that it really shouldn't be replaced after 5 years, and they're not hard miles. So it was more or less to try to get what the outliers were, so that we could get a better idea of what needed to be replaced when, instead of just using one cookie board, every 5 years replace it.
So keep fixing it? I mean,
Well-
I don't know.
Well, I think at the end of the day, we don't have a vehicle today. We're not going to get one tomorrow, even if we could fund it today. So you need an operating fleet, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I look more to you guys. I mean, we have a level of service to maintain.
So,
We can't replace the car tomorrow, so we need to keep that operating as best we can within reason. We're not talking $25,000 or something here. We're talking, as far as we know, if we get into something like that, then like we did with the transmission, we'll come back and have a conversation, right?
You know, I was actually going to say, you know, I know this is a draft, but it does put some context on the urgency of it. And you said replace or, you know, fix, and I say both. You replace it as the final piece, but again, those are long projects. To put it out to bid and, you know, get a vehicle takes quite a bit of time. And to Chairman Smith's point, in the interim, we still need to get it back up and functioning so you have a full complement for the fleet. So I think we get it up and running, we get those things done. I don't think it would change the dire need for the vehicle in the long term. It just buys us a little bit more time to sort of figure out what that cost is and where that falls in line. It's my stance on it.
I just want to clarify again, because it's getting referenced a lot. This policy is a draft form. The point section was not ever voted on or approved by the capital planning committee. We were still working on it. So I don't want to speak for the committee as a whole, but it's not something I don't think we would put. It's a great reference to have, but it would not necessarily be a make it or break it for us. So I just don't want, as Dan would say, for everyone at home to think that this policy is locked in and stuff, because it's not. It was in a very draft form.
It's a very valid point, but as a reference, it's, you know, it's still there to use. I mean, it doesn't carry substantive weight in the long-term decision, but it helps build context around the need. And even if it's just that, I think.
And I would mostly agree, but I don't know when else we've used draft policies to do that kind of a thing. So I am struggling a little bit with this is not an approved policy and it's being used to bolster why something is needing replacement when it is not an approved policy at this time. So I do personally struggle with that a little bit.
I want to be clear. I didn't even think about this policy. It was recommended to me to submit because I was told other departments had done it in the past.
The only departments we've asked this from was for, I believe, highway and fire, and that was so that they could help us figure out our point system because of the length of like a fire truck. When it had been run through before, the grading, the pointing system, it was, if I'm remembering correctly, it didn't work and it didn't apply to that type of a vehicle. So and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, I cannot think of a department where we have asked them to use this policy as a legitimate tool to assess a vehicle's condition.
And that's fair, Deb. Again, I only submitted it so you guys.
Sure, yeah, and
I'm not trying to strong arm you guys.
And I don't think you are in any way, shape, or form. I'm just hearing that there's a lot of weight being put into this, and my concern is it is a draft policy, and I've never seen where a draft policy has been given that much weight to use as something.
I've never seen a draft policy be discussed this much.
I've never seen it discussed outside of trying to move towards not draft. But anyhow, I think, you know, full transparency, those that may not know, we've had issues with two cars on some regularity back and forth or at the same time. So maintaining the fleet right now has been very challenging. Regardless, you know, I think what I'm hearing from everyone, I think everyone's agreeing generally, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that regardless of what we decide to do from a capital standpoint on replacement or not, we still need to have them operational. And if they're not operational, then they come out of the equation about ACO we just talked about. So I think no matter what, we need to keep them operating. If it's a substantial, extraordinary amount, like the transmission as an example, then I know you'll bring it back to us and we'll have that conversation if that changes things. But does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah. Do you have something you want to say?
No, I'm not on capital planning, so I can't speak to, you know, with any authority on what you do or how you do it. It just seems to me we've got at least one, maybe two cruisers that are nearing the end of their useful life, and we're band-aiding them together, which is okay. We have to keep things going. I agree with that. But it seems like knowing that's the case, and I'm not comparing this to we need the roof or replace the carpet or all the other stuff that capital works on, the trucks and all that other stuff. We have to have a functioning police department, so we ought to be, in my opinion, financially, we ought to be looking towards getting a new cruiser in the works, because it takes, what's it take you, a year to get one, or 8 months? It takes, they don't happen overnight.
So Deb, I think Deb, you had asked
Yeah.
at the last meeting, and I had spoken with a neighboring chief, and I was told 9 months to a year. After, a lot of things happened after my budget hearing. I met with MHQ, formerly, it's McGovern now, formerly MHQ, where we get, and they've told me that there's no reason why they shouldn't have a vehicle out the door in 6 months.
Okay.
They said 4 months, 6 months is their market. I'm skeptical, but that's what they told me. So Deb, I meant to shoot you a text message or an email as well, just saying, hey, I did have this conversation. So,
Okay.
And I don't mean to interfere at all in capital planning and how you prioritize stuff. It's not my business. I'm only speaking for the use of the police department. We need to, well, just my opinion, we need to provide for a new vehicle before too long, seems like. You can prioritize all the other things to the best of your ability.
Other questions not answered on cruiser at this point? No. Okay.
And then the last piece. I level funded part-time wages. We still are actively looking for part-time officers. I know Town Administrator Smith has run the ad several times, word of mouth. We have people that say, oh, I would be interested in, and I try to encourage them to apply, and we just aren't getting anybody. So when I submitted my budget, I just went, well, we don't have anybody. The two that we had, one became full-time, the other one is no longer with us. So in doing so, Officer Gordon, as most of you guys know, is getting ready to retire in October, I think is what her letter said. And she has full intentions on joining us in a part-time capacity. Officer Gordon brings a tremendous amount of experience. I think she has been welcomed into the community very quickly. And so to be able to keep her and to keep what she brings, I think is very valuable to not only me as having the vision of community-orientated police department, but for what she does in the community. With Ziva in particular, she does a lot with programs. She's up here with Paula running programs. She's run programs with the library. It's just tremendous what she does. All that to say is that she is restricted in her first year of what she can do, and that those restrictions fall under her retirement. But I'm asking that you guys consider a $10,000 increase into the part-time wages, so that would raise it to $16,000, and that would give me the capacity to have Officer Gordon in a 10-hour-a-week position. Obviously, she won't work every week. There will be times when she does take vacation time and so forth. And so that would be my request for an adjustment in that line.
Chief, that's one shift.
The idea is that she does court duties, she does firearms licensing for me, she does the dog, so she'll have mandatory training. It'll be about one shift a week.
And don't we have to take her back at the same rate that she retired at?
I would be more than happy to work the details out with the town administrator. I know that we have a part-time scale. I don't know if she stays at the rate that she's currently at, or if she would go to my recommendation would be the top step of the part-time scale, which is within 30 cents, 40 cents of where she currently is. So she maybe would look at a small decrease. I know that you guys are looking at a wage adjustment outside a COLA. So I don't know if that obviously would go up if that was recommended by everybody. So my recommendation would be step 10 at the bare minimum of part-time.
Well, we'll take that offline. That's not necessarily a discussion for here. The discussion for here is that the appropriate amount for what you envision and she's interested in partaking for the balance of that fiscal year. And I guess the follow-up, because I wasn't here the other night, was just, does it also incorporate enough if we do have part-time officers, other part-time officers, or does this just cover that?
It covers just that.
just.
It would cover
part.
just Officer Gordon's
Okay.
position.
So,
Would you still have a need for other try that again. Would you still have a need for other part-time officers if Officer Gordon accepted this position?
Yes, there's always a need for part-time officers that would be able to offset. We haven't had a tremendous amount of forced overtime, but there has been more forced overtime recently than normal.
How many would you still like to keep slots for?
do you mean?
I'd be
that-
happy with one, but we have currently 3,
Okay.
is what we try to fit.
Can I rephrase that? Are you looking for how much money? Not
how
how many
many
people,
bodies.
right? You're looking for how much funding in that
Both.
line?
Yes, both. Like how many part-time officers?
I think how many-
And how much funding for them?
How many is flexible up to what makes sense for chief? Because some may work one a month, some may work one a week. So
Oh, that's-
the number of people isn't
Yeah,
really
no, I'm
how that's
thinking-
budgeted. It's more a number for shifts.
I'm thinking part-time, 20 hours a week. So,
No,
yep.
no,
Nope, that's totally right.
it changes. It changes. No, but to your point, Deb, I would like to have 3 part-timers. At the bare minimum, 2, and then Laura.
Would be nice.
It would be nice.
What I'm hearing is that number is not 10,000. If you could have both of those things, that's not the number.
That's not the number if I could have both, but
Okay.
right now I would like to have just Laura.
So, back to us. The request is 10 to facilitate a specific planned case that at least I personally, and I think many are, would be glad to have. Is there an ask for chiefs to look at what would also incorporate some part-time outside of Officer Gordon as a number, or are we good for now?
So I'm guessing the number in there now would be a sufficient carryover for future or additional part-timers, should we get any. So there's 6,000 in there now. So then
So 22
22.
would give some capacity?
Yes.
So maybe I answered my own question, or you answered it for me. Thank you.
Yeah, that's
16 for Laura, another 6 would be for
additional.
additional.
Okay. So budget is 6 right now. The ask is 10 to
10.
16 more,
To 16.
depending on what we're trying to do. Does anyone have any questions on that or need any additional information on that request?
I just think it's, again, that we're here for finances, not just my opinion, but financing the police department adequately so we don't have, no disrespect, so we don't have burnout cops that are being forced to do overtime with no relief when they need it, is not a good thing for them, and it's not a good thing for the people in town either. So I think funding this reasonably is a good thing to do, all around.
And I believe that I feel that support from you all. I mean, we have been trying to fill the positions. We just, like everywhere, it's not that you guys have ever told me don't fill those positions, and we just can't fill them, so.
Can I ask Chief on that regard with trying to fill them, with the changes in post and requirements for officers, how many guys who have their full-time certifications are looking for part-time gigs in other agencies when they can just pick up overtime for twice the money in their own house?
It's hard. I mean, that post really did a number on our small communities. I mean, it really did. What you're finding is people like Officer Gordon that are willing to stay on. I've spoken with a few other officers that have retired, and they're like, yeah, maybe I would do a part-time position. But part-time isn't what it used to be. Part-time is long gone. And me and Brian had a great conversation recently with the sheriff, the new sheriff, or the interim sheriff, and there's Greenfield is looking to do a full-time academy at a part-time pace. So maybe that would spark some interest in our county, and maybe people would be like, yeah, I want to maintain my full-time job, and I'll invest. So if that gets up and running and that becomes an option for people, where we went to the part-time academy, it was 3 months, and now they would still go to the academy in a part-time capacity, but it would be longer. It'd be a year plus, but that's still a big ask for people. It's a big ask.
Chief, do you know off the top of your head, and if you don't, it's totally okay, how much forced overtime you're doing a month in hours?
So it's difficult, Deb, because like in February, we had Officer Gordon who took some vacation time, another
Yep.
officer took vacation time, and so there was some in February. I want to say it wasn't tremendous, 5-6 shifts
Okay.
over the span of a month. I think one officer ended up getting forced 2 or 3 times though, just because of the way it had
Yeah.
fallen. The summertime, it could be more. This time, you usually don't see forces because people aren't going anywhere. My worry is that when Officer Gordon does retire, are we going to be able to fill that position? Then what do the forces look like too?
Okay.
There's a lot of unknowns. So, but yeah, that's what I think. February is 5.
Okay, I think we have what we need, and we've asked for what we'd like for the 10th, so.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I know we're running a little over our timeline. Is everybody good to just wrap up with Chief Wonka and just touch on the last budget memo, so at least we've talked about it, and then we can hit it next meeting. Chief, welcome back.
I'm back.
So, thank you for bringing Chief Welcome-Bright and going through that review with the team here.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
The memo you sent, so there's some adjustments on the EMS, and then we have the staffing item that was in your narrative that got missed in the discussion because we were having some technical difficulties, right?
Correct, and then there was another, I believe there was another memo because Capital had requested some information on
Truck.
on the fire truck.
Funding.
Yep.
And that's in as well. Questions on the EMS assessments piece in the memo? We'll just be expeditious about this.
Seems
All
pretty
good?
straightforward.
Okay.
So am I reducing the EMS budget accordingly? Okay.
Yes.
I attempted to do it, but it
You're
would not
locked
let
out.
me.
Yeah,
You're locked out.
You can't.
I could do it, but I'll let Brian do it.
We can get a reduction taken.
Yeah.
And lock it.
So, net of that, there's a decrease in your overall budget by
51 roughly?
51K roughly. And there was a staff request in the narrative that we didn't discuss. So, and that was the way it was requested to be presented, so thank you for doing that. That was on us for missing it. Questions on the staffing request because of the reduction in the assessments, the net increase on the budget, if adopted before Brian decreases his budget, would be 7,000.
Needs to flip over somewhere else.
So, 58 overall for the staff request.
Correct, I
Net
briefly
7.
touched upon it in the memo, thinking that you guys would be able to read the FY26 operating budget request, specifically the request for the new services or changes to service.
Questions about that request? Any further information needed? So we have it. You still go ahead and make the adjustment. We understand that means it'll be a 58 increase if we do incorporate that. We'll make sure it is on our list of items that are not showing in the budget, but are requested. Fire truck funding method, or not funding methods, but payment methods.
Yeah, so in my research, I found, so the last truck we bought back in 2014, 2015, we realized a savings by paying it upfront. Since then, they've changed that ruling where we can no longer do that. So it's more of a payment breakdown. You can give them upfront money, and a lot of it depended. The cost savings really depended on how much money we were willing to put up front versus that second payment. But it seemed to me, after all the questions, it seemed to me that we weren't really interested in doing a 5, 6, 7, 8 year lease model. It was more 2 or 3 years. So at 17 months, that stretches, a 17 to 24 month build time would stretch those. I feel like it would stretch it out over two fiscal years. So it would be broken down into 2 payments. So it really depends on how much money we're willing to put up front on that front one to break down on that second one. And what we'd realize for a cost savings versus, keeping that money in an account, making interest on it for us versus handing it over to somebody else.
So there's a couple lease models in there.
Yeah,
Are
I
they a
threw those in
$1
there.
buyout or just an automatic ownership or something?
I believe it was just automatic ownership, but
Okay.
I didn't get the impression that you all were too interested in that model, but I threw them in there just in case.
I think we wanted to see them.
You talking about the 5, 7,
Yep.
10 years?
Yeah.
No, I mean, they're expensive.
I don't know, 5.5% is pretty good compared to an auto loan right now.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
It's still $130,000 over the life of the 5 years, though.
Yeah, I didn't do the math, so I
Yeah.
figured it was a lot.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, 80,000 for that one, yeah.
Further buying method, funding method questions? Does this get us what we needed for
No,
capital?
this is what we asked for.
Okay. No questions on what's presented, good there?
I did do some research, on grants on especially the assistance to firefighting grants. Obviously, we know the political realm is very volatile right now, and there's not much coming out of the federal government only because of that. But the AFG grants for vehicles are extremely competitive. Everybody across the country is putting in for those. So there's a smaller pot of money that a lot more people are asking for that. So for us, with our financial statements that we have to submit, we generally get kicked out of that option very, very fast.
Okay. Anything else you had for us? Any other questions for Chief Wonka? Nope. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Veterans and I lost my list here. Celebrations?
The level funded.
That's what I thought. Questions? Perfect. Moving on to the supplemental, I think we covered all of the other items. Health insurance, so we heard some of us or all of us heard a little precursor to this the other day. But 18 to 20% increase on the health insurance premiums. Treasurer provided some recommendations. And the other questions about it, I'd say we can all simmer on it and talk about it in a future meeting, but any questions or further information on that?
No, sir.
We talked about Chief Holst. We have the preliminary revenue projections here. Any specific questions about what's on here or further information? I think we do not have the free cash detail, or I say detail, the drivers behind the million plus free cash. I think
I
that's
will send that to all of you tonight,
Okay.
so you know where that was coming
tomorrow.
from. I'll send it all to you tomorrow.
And then if people have questions further on kind of the sources, we can
Leaks out if I don't do it.
we can reply to Brian and let him know, and he can have Deb look into that, or whoever, whatever department as needed. Anything else on it? Is on the face value good? Questions? Any other information for next time? Okay. I feel like I'm missing one that we were going to cover, but maybe that was all of them. It's good enough. There's a lot.
And we got another meeting next week,
And the week after.
and the week after.
And the week
And
after.
the week after. And then the annual town meeting. Oh, wait. And then there's discussion about a special town meeting, right? So
And then
I heard there's a special town meeting coming too. So we're going to have to figure out what that timing looks like.
We're gonna have a
'cause
special town meeting before the annual town meeting?
Is there really enough time?
there's
Yeah.
enough time.
Does it really make sense for a week or two? Anyway, okay. We'll talk about that next week.
It'll be on your agenda for next week. It's
all right.
Take Care of Church Street Bridge.
Which we want to do. So
Yes.
don't get me wrong, it's a good reason. We want to get that procurement out and have it happen. Anything else for tonight? Budget calendar, we are here next week, right? All of us
I think I
together?
put that in your packets this time.
You did this time, yes, the
Sorry.
3rd.
Sorry, did I say that out loud?
That is not, that is not true.
So you
That is
all-
not true.
Capital meets next Thursday.
Yeah, we have
So
our meeting.
the board meets on Monday, finance meets separately on Monday, Thursday capital meets. The joint is on the 10th.
That's fair. Yes.
That's more accurate. I thought that was a little weird. Everybody has meetings. We're not
Gentlemen,
meeting
do you
together
feel that we
until
need
the
to
10th.
meet next Monday?
No.
Okay, the finance committee will not be meeting next Monday.
Are you okay with that? Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't even speak for you.
That's okay.
I don't think the three of you will be done with the draft warrant on Monday that you're going to review for the first time. But I'm assuming you all are going to want to review and make an opinion on that. So as we look at the calendars and trying to put things together, I just want to make sure that I get drafts to Capital, to FinCom to get their review. So if you want that at your standalone meetings, please let me know in advance so I can get you whatever information you need.
We just canceled our standalone meeting.
If
What
you
do
want
we-
it at your standalone meeting,
Okay,
next
let me
Thursday.
let me
Which would be
ask this
Thursday
question
the
again.
6th.
What is the timeline from when we approve the warrant to when we're going to have that special? What's the minimum?
14 days.
2 weeks. Okay. So, sounds like we're trying to do this ASAP. So we'll
We're
talk
hoping
more
for
in
the end of
detail
March.
about end of March. Yeah. Okay. So, finance and capital, depending on what ends up. Well, it's the bridge. At least all three of us. Are you all good reviewing it potentially on the 10th and then possibly making an approval that night on the warrant? Or
Yeah, we
do
do
you-
that frequently. That'd be fine.
well, normally we review them for multiple meetings, but I just want to make sure. I don't know if there'll be other articles on there. We're not quite there yet. So
Okay.
if that's good enough, then fine. Otherwise, we can get you a draft for Monday if you're still meeting.
If you have it for the capital meeting on the 6th, that's great, but no pressure.
I will have
We'll
already
have already
drafted it,
reviewed it on the 3rd.
and I can
Oh,
give you their
okay.
edits.
Yeah, so if you shoot it to us, capital can look at it.
Sure.
Perfect. Okay, thank you all.
No finance on Monday.
Correct.
Board on Monday, capital on Thursday.
Yep.
Special town meeting on the 3rd and 10th, discussion and
Yes.
approval.
When will we meet for capital?
It says Town Hall.
Okay, town hall, okay.
If there's any open items for capital that people need information from department heads or need a department head to show up,
Nothing I can think
coordinate
of off
with
the top of
Ben
my head,
or with
but
that.
We can take a look.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe all the department heads have responded to all the questions, except for anyone that we met with tonight, which we didn't really have a ton of questions for. So I think capital is in good shape to begin our review process.
Got a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.